New York City burned. Peter Parker stood on the roof of a collapsing apartment building in Queens, watching smoke rise from Manhattan across the East River. 3 days ago, the CDC had issued warnings about a rabies-like infection spreading from Atlanta. 2 days ago, the National Guard had tried to quarantine Manhattan. Yesterday, the quarantine failed. Now the dead walked, and Peter Parker, Spider-Man, 25 years old, photographer for the Daily Bugle when he wasn't saving people, was running out of webs and running out of time. Help! Somebody help us! Peter's head snapped toward the sound. His spider sense tingled, not the sharp spike of immediate danger, but the low hum of threat nearby. Below, in the alley between his building and the next, a family was trapped. Mother, father, 2 kids, maybe 7 and 9, surrounded by 8 walkers that shambled toward them with arms outstretched and jaws working. Peter didn't hesitate. He never did. That was the problem. He leaped from the rooftop, web line already shooting from his wrist, swinging down in an arc that would have looked graceful if he hadn't been so exhausted. 3 days of constant rescues, 3 days without sleep, 3 days watching the city he loved tear itself apart. The landing was perfect. Peter crashed into the nearest walker feet first, double kick that sent the corpse flying into a brick wall hard enough to crack its skull. Not dead. They didn't die easy, but incapacitated. That was enough. "Get behind me," Peter shouted to the family. The father grabbed both kids, pulled them back. The mother was frozen, staring at Peter with wide eyes that said she couldn't process what she was seeing. Man in red and blue suit, moving like physics didn't apply to him, fighting dead people who shouldn't be walking. Welcome to the apocalypse. Nothing made sense anymore. Peter webbed 2 walkers to the wall, sticky white strands that pinned them by their torsos, legs kicking uselessly. Another walker lunged, arms reaching for Peter's throat. He dodged left, his spider sense giving him that split-second warning that made the difference between life and death. Then grabbed the walker's arm and used its own momentum to flip it over his shoulder into the pavement. 5 down, 3 left. The remaining walkers ignored Peter, focused on the family. Easier prey, slower, more afraid. Peter had learned over 3 days that these things could smell fear or hear heartbeats or sense something that made them prioritize certain targets. Didn't matter. He wouldn't let them reach the family. He webbed the next walker's legs, yanked hard, sent it crashing face first into concrete, jumped over it, landed in front of the final 2 walkers, raised his fists. His spider sense screamed, but 3 days of constant combat had dulled his reflexes to the point where even a screaming warning came too late. Peter spun, saw the walker he'd flipped earlier getting up faster than it should, saw its mouth open impossibly wide, saw teeth that were too sharp and too hungry, tried to dodge, but his exhausted body moved a half-second too slowly. The teeth found his shoulder, through the suit, through the advanced fabric that was supposed to protect him, right into flesh. Peter felt teeth scrape bone, felt something cold and wrong flood into his bloodstream, felt the walker's jaw clench like a bear trap that wouldn't let go. No, 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 no. Peter grabbed the walker's head with both hands and pulled. Super strength versus dead grip. Peter won. Ripped the thing off him, threw it so hard it sailed over the building and disappeared. But the damage was done. The family screamed. Peter looked down at his shoulder, saw the bite, saw torn suit, saw blood, saw the distinctive half-moon of human teeth marks that everyone in New York had learned meant death. You got bit, you turned, no exceptions, no cure, just a timer counting down to when you stopped being you. "Oh God," the mother whispered. "Oh God, I'm fine," Peter lied, but his voice shook. "I'm fine. Just go. Get to the evacuation center at Madison Square Garden. Go now." The father didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his family and ran, looking back once with an expression Peter couldn't read. Gratitude, horror, pity. Peter stood alone in the alley, surrounded by incapacitated walkers, looking at the bite on his shoulder. His healing factor was already working, the wound knitting itself closed faster than normal, webbing already stopping the bleeding. But something was wrong. The edges of the bite were turning gray. Black veins were spreading from the wound like cracks in glass. The infection was trying to take hold. His healing factor was fighting it. But which would win? Peter's hands shook as he webbed the bite closed, covering it with sticky strands that would hold better than any bandage. His mind raced through everything he knew about infections, about viruses, about his own biology. The spider that bit him 15 years ago had given him abilities beyond human. Enhanced strength, enhanced speed, enhanced reflexes, and a healing factor that let him recover from injuries that would hospitalize normal people. But this wasn't a normal injury. This was a zombie virus that killed everyone it infected. Could his healing factor beat it? Or would it just slow things down? Peter's spider sense tingled again. More walkers approaching. The noise of the fight had attracted them. Always more. Always coming. New York had 8 million people. How many were dead now? How many were walking? He shot a web line to the nearest rooftop and pulled himself up. Needed to get off street level. Needed to think. Needed. Pain lanced through his shoulder. Not the bite. Something deeper. Cellular. The infection spreading. Fighting his healing factor. Locked in a war inside his own body. Peter collapsed on the rooftop, gasping. His vision swam. For a moment, just a moment, he felt hungry. Not normal hungry. Something else. Something that looked at the fleeing family below and saw them as food. No, Peter said out loud, forcing the thought away. No, no, no. I'm not turning. I'm not. But he was. He could feel it. The healing factor was slowing the infection but not stopping it. Buying time. How much time? Days? Weeks? Peter pulled off his mask, let the cool night air hit his face. He was 25 years old. He'd been Spider-Man for a decade. He'd fought the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Venom. He'd saved New York a dozen times over. He'd done everything Uncle Ben had asked, used his power responsibly, helped people, made a difference, and now he was infected, turning into the thing he'd been fighting, becoming a threat to everyone he wanted to protect. Peter looked at the bite again. The black veins had spread further, creeping toward his neck like roots. His healing factor was visibly fighting. The veins would advance, then recede, then advance again. A battle happening at microscopic level. White blood cells versus zombie virus. Enhanced biology versus supernatural infection. The infection was winning. Slowly, but winning. Peter made a decision. He couldn't stay in New York. Too many people. If when he lost control, if he turned, he could kill hundreds before anyone stopped him. Spider-Man as a zombie would be unstoppable. Wall-crawling predator that could sense prey from blocks away and move faster than bullets. He had to leave. Get away from cities, from people. Find somewhere remote where he couldn't hurt anyone when the inevitable happened. South. He'd go south. Follow the evacuation routes backwards, away from the refugee centers, toward empty countryside. Maybe find a barn, a cabin, somewhere isolated. Chain himself up before he turned completely. Leave instructions on how to kill him properly. One last act of responsibility, making sure Spider-Man didn't become another monster. Peter pulled his mask back on, stood on shaking legs, and started web-slinging south. Manhattan burned behind him. The George Washington Bridge was packed with abandoned cars and shambling walkers. Peter swung over it all, heading for New Jersey, then Pennsylvania, then Virginia, then the Carolinas, then Georgia, running from death, running from himself, running from the hunger that was already starting to whisper in the back of his mind, telling him to stop, to turn around, to feed. With great power comes great responsibility, Peter whispered, Uncle Ben's words that had guided him for 10 years. Even now, especially now, I won't hurt anyone. I won't become a monster. I'll find a place to die quietly, alone, where no one else gets hurt. But deep down, Peter knew the truth. He wasn't going to die quietly. The infection was turning him into an apex predator with superhuman abilities. When he finally lost control, when the hunger took over completely, he'd become the most dangerous thing in the apocalypse, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. 5 days later, Peter crouched in an abandoned gas station somewhere in Southern Virginia, staring at his reflection in a cracked mirror. The bite on his shoulder had healed, sort of. The skin had closed over, white scar tissue covering the wound, but the veins were still black, spreading like spider webs across his chest, up his neck, visible even through his suit. His eyes were different too. Still brown, but the whites were yellowing slightly. Bloodshot. He looked sick. He looked wrong. Peter's hands trembled as he opened a can of beans he'd scavenged, one of 12 cans in his backpack, along with bottled water, a first aid kit, and web fluid cartridges that were running low. He'd been rationing food, trying to stretch supplies, but it didn't matter. Normal food didn't satisfy anymore. The hunger was getting worse. It had started 3 days ago. Peter had caught a rabbit using his enhanced reflexes, planning to cook it over a fire. But when he'd grabbed it, when he'd felt its heartbeat against his palms, when he'd smelled its blood, something in him had changed. His hands had moved without conscious thought, snapping the rabbit's neck, tearing into it raw. Peter had come back to awareness 5 minutes later, crouched in the woods, covered in blood and fur, the rabbit half-eaten. He'd thrown up immediately, horrified at what he'd done. But underneath the horror, underneath the disgust, had been satisfaction. The hunger had quieted. The gnawing emptiness had filled. For a few hours, now it was back. Worse than before. Peter could smell things he shouldn't be able to smell. Blood from miles away, the sweat of distant survivors, the rot of walkers mixed with something else that his changing biology recognized as potential food. His spider sense was changing too. It used to warn him about danger. Now it also alerted him to prey. Living things nearby. Heartbeats. Warmth. Food. Peter forced himself to eat the beans, even though they tasted like nothing. Like cardboard and salt. Like his taste buds were dying along with his humanity. He needed to maintain strength. Needed to stay in control as long as possible. Needed screaming. Distance. Maybe half a mile east. Peter's head snapped toward the sound. His spider sense tingled. Not danger. Prey. Living humans being attacked by walkers. His enhanced hearing picked out details. 3 voices. Maybe 4. Adults and children. Surrounded. Dying. The old Peter, the hero Peter, would have swung into action immediately. Save them. That's what Spider-Man did. That's what Uncle Ben had taught him. But the new Peter, the infected Peter, felt something else. Hunger. The screaming meant blood. Blood meant food. His body wanted him to go there to feed. No. Peter slammed his fist into the gas station wall, cracking concrete. I'm not a monster. I'm not. But he was moving anyway. Not toward the screaming. Away from it. Running. Web swinging through trees, putting distance between himself and the potential victims, because he didn't trust himself anymore. Didn't trust that he'd save them instead of attacking them. Peter traveled for 2 hours before stopping, putting enough distance that he couldn't hear the screaming anymore. He found an abandoned barn and collapsed inside, shaking. This was getting worse faster than he'd anticipated. The healing factor was still fighting. He could feel it, buying him time, but the infection was adapting, learning, spreading through his enhanced biology in ways it couldn't spread through normal humans. Normal people turned in hours. Peter had lasted days, but the trade-off was that his turn was different. Slower, more aware. He was becoming something worse than a simple walker, a zombie that kept his intelligence, his abilities, his instincts, but lost his humanity piece by piece. Peter tried to web himself to the barn wall, creating restraints that would hold him if he lost control during the night. But his web shooters were almost empty. He'd need to make more web fluid soon, but that required chemicals he didn't have, equipment he couldn't access, a lab that didn't exist anymore. The apocalypse had ended Spider-Man's ability to be Spider-Man. Poetic, in a horrible way. Peter managed to create rough restraints, webbing wrapped around his torso and arms, attached to barn beams that groaned under the strain. It wouldn't hold if he really tried to break free, but it might slow him down, might give him time to regain control if the hunger took over. He closed his eyes, tried to sleep, but his mind raced with thoughts of what he was becoming. Images of his future haunted him. Peter as a mindless walker. Peter hunting survivors. Peter using his powers to kill instead of save. Peter as the thing he'd spent 10 years fighting against. Uncle Ben, Peter whispered into the darkness. I'm sorry. I tried to do the right thing. Tried to be responsible. But I don't know how to fight this. I don't know how to... His spider sense exploded with warning. Something was approaching. Fast. Living. Prey. A deer crashed through the barn door. Panicked. Running from something. Walkers. Probably shambling through the woods outside. The deer saw Peter. Tried to turn. But Peter was already moving. His webbing restraints snapped like paper. Peter covered the distance in a heartbeat, moving on pure instinct, grabbed the deer by the neck, slammed it to the ground. The deer kicked, tried to escape, but Peter's grip was iron. His mouth opened. His teeth, when had they gotten sharper, bit down. Blood. Warm. Fresh. The hunger roared its approval as Peter fed, rational thought shutting down, replaced by animal instinct that said, eat, consume, satisfy the emptiness. Peter came back to himself 10 minutes later. The deer was dead. Most of it was gone. Peter was covered in blood from face to chest, kneeling in the barn with pieces of meat still in his hands, and the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that he felt better. The hunger had quieted. The gnawing emptiness had filled. His body hummed with satisfaction. "Oh God," Peter choked out, staring at his blood-covered hands. "Oh God, what did I do? What am I becoming?" He'd eaten a deer raw. He'd killed it with his bare hands and teeth like some kind of animal. The infection was winning. His humanity was slipping. Soon he wouldn't come back to himself after feeding. Soon, the hunger would be all that remained. Peter stumbled outside, vomited blood and venison, collapsed in the dirt. His healing factor worked overtime, processing the raw meat, fighting the infection that was trying to turn his digestive system into something designed for carrion. The battle inside him was constant now, never-ending war between what he'd been and what he was becoming. He looked at his hands. The veins were blacker. His fingernails looked darker, almost gray. When he opened his mouth, he could feel that his teeth were definitely sharper. Not fangs. Not yet, but changing. Adapting. The infection was rewriting his biology, using his spider powers as a template to create something new. Something worse. Peter checked his shoulder where the bite had been. The scar was still there, but now it pulsed with dark veins that seemed to have their own heartbeat. The infection's ground zero, patient zero with superpowers. He tried to calculate how much time he had left. Days? A week? At this rate, he'd lose control completely within 72 hours. Maybe less if he couldn't stop himself from feeding. Every time he gave in to the hunger, every time he let instinct win, he'd lose more of himself. Accelerate the transformation. Peter webbed himself back into the barn restraints, tighter this time, using the last of his web fluid to create bonds that might actually hold. He couldn't trust himself anymore. Couldn't trust that he wouldn't attack the next human he encountered. The hunger was too strong. The instinct too powerful. As night fell, Peter heard sounds in the distance. Screaming again. Gunshots. Survivors fighting walkers somewhere to the south. His spider sense pinged, alerting him to living humans within his range. His body wanted to break free, to hunt, to feed on something more substantial than deer meat. Peter closed his eyes and focused on one thought, one memory, one lesson that had defined his life. With great power comes great responsibility. Even now, even as he turned, even as he lost himself, he still had responsibility. Responsibility to not hurt anyone. Responsibility to isolate himself before he became a threat. Responsibility to end his own life before he became a monster that killed innocents. "Tomorrow," Peter whispered, forcing the hunger down through sheer willpower. "Tomorrow I find somewhere more remote, somewhere with no people for miles, somewhere I can chain myself up properly and wait for the end, somewhere no one will find me when I turn completely." But even as he made the promise, Peter knew the truth. He was running out of time. The infection was accelerating. His control was slipping. And somewhere deep in his changing mind, a voice that wasn't quite his own whispered that running was pointless. The hunger would win eventually. It always did. And when it did, Spider-Man would become the most dangerous predator the apocalypse had ever seen. 2 days later, Peter stood at the edge of a farm in rural Georgia, his spider sense screaming warnings about danger ahead. Lots of danger. Walkers. Maybe 20 or 30 of them, shambling through fields toward a white farmhouse where he could hear people shouting, guns firing, children crying. Peter should have kept moving, should have avoided the farm entirely. He was getting worse. The black veins covered his entire torso now, creeping up his neck toward his face. His eyes were definitely yellow-tinged, almost glowing in dim light. He could smell the people in the farmhouse from half a mile away, could hear their individual heartbeats, could sense them as prey in ways that made his mouth water. He should have run. Should have found that isolated spot he'd been searching for. Should have stayed away from living people. But the old Peter, the hero Peter, the piece of him that was still fighting the infection, that piece heard children screaming and couldn't walk away. One last time, Peter whispered to himself, pulling his tattered mask over his face. The suit was damaged from days of travel, covered in dirt and blood, barely recognizable as Spider-Man's costume anymore. One last save, then I isolate completely. I swear. He webbed toward the farmhouse. His web shooters were empty now. He was using organic webbing that his body had started producing as the infection mutated his biology. The webbing was grayish instead of white, sticky but wrong. Another sign of how far he'd transformed. Peter landed in the farmyard and immediately understood why his spider sense was screaming. Not 20 walkers, more like 40. And not just walkers. These were fresh, recently turned. They moved faster than the rotted corpses he'd seen in New York. Danger. The farmhouse defenders were losing. Peter could see people on the porch, an older man with a shotgun, a bearded guy with a hunting rifle, a younger guy with a pistol who clearly didn't know how to use it properly, a woman with a bow, another man with an axe. They were fighting well, but they were outnumbered and surrounded. Peter didn't announce himself, didn't introduce himself, just attacked. He moved through the walker herd like death itself. Super strength turning every punch into a lethal blow, spider sense, allowing him to dodge grasping hands without conscious thought, enhanced reflexes making him faster than anything human should be. He grabbed walkers by their necks and threw them 30 feet into trees. He punched through skulls with bare fists. He kicked with enough force to snap spine. But he wasn't fighting like Spider-Man anymore. This was savage, brutal, animal. Peter felt the hunger rising as he fought, felt his control slipping as blood splattered across his suit, felt the infection pushing him to bite, to feed, to consume. No, Peter roared, forcing the hunger down. Not yet. Not them. Hold on. Just hold on. He killed the last walker, snapped its neck and dropped the body, then stood swaying in the farmyard, covered in black blood, breathing heavily. The hunger was screaming at him. The farmhouse defenders were right there. Living meat. Fresh blood. So easy. What the hell are you? Peter turned slowly. The bearded man, the one with the rifle, was pointing his weapon at Peter. Behind him, the others were equally armed, equally suspicious. Smart. They should be suspicious. Peter was a threat. Stay back, Peter managed, his voice rougher than normal, strained. I helped, but I'm dangerous. You just killed 40 walkers in under 2 minutes, a different man said, stepping forward. Older, southern accent, authoritative. Who are you? Peter Parker, Peter said, because lying seemed pointless now. He pulled off his mask, revealing his face, pale, eyes yellow-tinged, black veins visible on his neck. I'm infected. I'm turning. But I still have some control. I heard you fighting. I came to help. But I shouldn't stay. I can't. Infected? The bearded man, his name tag said. Shane raised his gun higher. Then you need to die. Rick, he's bit. We shoot him now before. Shane. Wait. The authoritative man, Rick, held up his hand. Look at him. Really look. Infected people don't talk. They don't help. They don't. What are you? Peter laughed bitterly. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong bite. I was Spider-Man in New York. Got bit saving a family. My powers gave me a healing factor that's fighting the infection, but it's losing. I've got maybe a few days before I turn completely. I was traveling south, trying to find somewhere isolated to end it quietly. But I heard you fighting and I could. He gestured at the corpses surrounding them. I couldn't just let you die. Old habits. But I should go now. Every second I'm here, I'm a threat. The hunger's getting worse. I don't trust myself anymore. Hunger? The woman with the bow, Asian, maybe Korean, looked pale. You want to eat us? Yes, Peter admitted, because lying would be worse. The infection makes me want to feed on living people. I've been fighting it, eating animals instead, but it's getting harder to resist. You should stay away from me. Everyone should. I'm becoming the thing I used to fight. The group exchanged glances. Peter could smell their fear, their confusion, their debate about whether to trust him or kill him. His spider sense pinged weakly. Not immediate danger, but potential threat. They were seconds away from shooting him. Smart. Logical. Then a boy stepped forward. Maybe 11 years old. Carl, based on the way Rick immediately moved to block him. "You saved us," Carl said simply. "You could have just left, could have let the walkers kill us. But you didn't. That makes you good, right? Even if you're infected." Peter looked at the kid and felt something break inside his chest. Carl reminded him of God. What was her name? His neighbor's daughter back in Queens. The one who'd dressed as Spider-Man for Halloween 3 years ago. He couldn't remember her name anymore. The infection was taking his memories, one at a time, leaving only hunger. "I was good," Peter said quietly. "I'm trying to stay good, but I'm running out of time." Rick studied Peter for a long moment, then lowered his gun. "Shane, stand down. Glenn, Maggie, help Beth and Patricia check the perimeter. Herschel, can you look at his bite?" "Rick, this is insane," Shane protested. "He's infected. He admits it. We shoot infected. That's the rule." "The rule is we protect our own, and we make hard choices," Rick replied. "This man just saved our lives. We owe him the chance to explain himself before we execute him. That's my call as leader. You got a problem with it, we'll talk later." Shane backed down, but his eyes never left Peter. Smart man, keeping the threat in sight. Peter would do the same in his position. An older man approached Herschel, a veterinarian based on his calm demeanor and doctor's instincts. He examined Peter's shoulder where the bite had been, checking the black veins, the discolored skin, the obvious signs of infection. "I've never seen anything like this," Herschel murmured. "The wounds healed, but the infection spreading systemically. Your veins, your skin, your eyes, you should be dead. Should have turned hours after being bit. But you're still conscious, still talking, still in control." "How?" "Spider bite gave me powers when I was 15, Peter explained. "Enhanced strength, reflexes, healing. The healing factor's fighting the zombie virus, slowing it down, but not stopping it. I've got days, maybe a week before I lose control completely. That's why I need to leave, before I hurt someone." "Or," Rick said slowly, "you could stay, help us. You're useful, saved our lives in 2 minutes. Maybe we can help you. Find a cure or a treatment." "There's no cure," Peter interrupted. "Everyone knows that. Once you're bit, you turn. I'm just turning slower because of my powers. But I'll turn eventually, and when I do," he met Rick's eyes, "I'll be the most dangerous walker you've ever seen. Super strength, enhanced senses, spider powers. I'll kill dozens before anyone stops me. That's why I need to be far from people when it happens."
"What if we change you up, Dale?" the older man with the RV suggested. "Keep you contained. If you're really fighting this, really trying to stay human, maybe you deserve the chance to try.
Maybe he kills us all when he breaks free," Shane interjected. "Maybe he turns in the middle of the night and tears through this farm before we can stop him. Maybe trusting a walking corpse is the stupidest thing we've ever done." "He's not a corpse yet," Carl said stubbornly. "He's a person who's sick. We don't kill sick people." "We do if they're gonna eat us, Carl," Sane's voice rose. "Rick, I'm telling you as your friend, this is a mistake. We shoot him now. We bury him deep. We forget this ever happened." Peter looked around the group. He saw fear, suspicion, debate, but he also saw something he hadn't expected: hope. Some of them, Carl, Dale, even Rick, actually thought he could be saved, thought he deserved the chance to try. They were wrong. Peter knew he was beyond saving, but maybe he could buy them a few days of his help before he turned. Teach them tactics, share information, use his powers to protect them one last time before becoming a monster. "I'll make you a deal," Peter said carefully. "I help you survive. I use my abilities to scout, fight, protect. But the moment I lose control, the moment I start to turn completely, you kill me. No hesitation. Headshot. Make sure I don't come back. Can you do that?" "Yes," Rick said immediately. Shane looked like he wanted to argue, but Rick's tone left no room for debate. "You have my word. You help us, we'll help you. And if when you turn, we'll make it quick and merciful." Peter nodded slowly, pulled his mask back on. "Then I guess I'm joining your group, for however long I have left. Days, probably. Maybe a week if I'm lucky. But I warn you now, the hunger's getting worse. I'm eating animals raw to satisfy it. I'm forgetting things, names, faces, memories. I'm becoming something else piece by piece. If I ever seem too dangerous, if you think I'm about to lose control, don't wait. Don't hesitate. Just end it. We understand, Herschel said gently. But until then, you're welcome on my farm. Any man who saves lives instead of taking them deserves shelter and respect, regardless of what's happening to him. Peter laughed, harsh, bitter sound. I don't deserve anything except a bullet, but I'll take the shelter, and I'll try to earn it before the end. As the group headed back to the farmhouse, discussing sleeping arrangements and guard duties, Peter hung back. He could smell them all so clearly, their individual scents, their blood, the fierce sweat that meant easy prey. His mouth watered, his hands trembled. The hunger whispered that they were food, not friends, and feeding would be so easy, so satisfying. No, Peter growled at himself. They're people, they're survivors. I protect them. That's what I do. That's who I am. Hold on. Just hold on a little longer. But even as he made the promise, Peter felt his control slipping, felt the infection spreading, felt the countdown accelerate. He'd bought himself a few more days of humanity. But the monster was coming. And when it arrived, everyone on this farm would be in danger from the one person trying hardest to protect them. The debate about Peter's fate lasted 3 hours and happened in Herschel's living room while Peter waited outside, chained to the porch with his own webbing at his insistence. He could hear every word through enhanced hearing. Shane arguing for immediate execution. Dale making philosophical arguments about humanity and mercy. Rick trying to find middle ground. Andrea worried about safety. Glenn quietly supporting giving Peter a chance. Carl's voice cut through the arguments. He saved us. We don't kill people who save us. That's not who we are. He's not people, Carl, Shane replied, frustration clear. He's infected. Turning. A ticking time bomb that's gonna go off and kill us all when we least expect it. Then we prepare for when he turns, Rick said. But until then, he's a resource. He's useful. He's dangerous. Shane's voice rose. Rick, you saw what he did to those walkers. 40 of them in 2 minutes. Bare hands. No weapons. If that thing turns hostile, if he decides to feed on us instead of deer, we're dead. All of us. The kids. Lori. Everyone. Is that worth the risk? Silence. Then Herschel spoke, his veterinarian's calm cutting through the tension. I examined his bite. The infection's behavior is unlike anything in my medical experience. It's fighting something. His healing factor, he called it. The wound should have killed him days ago. The fact that he's still conscious, still rational, still choosing to help us rather than harm us, that suggests he has more time than a normal infected person. Maybe weeks, or maybe hours, Shane countered. Maybe he loses control tonight while we're sleeping and we wake up to find half the farm dead. Then we take precautions, Rick decided. He stays chained when he's not actively helping us. Armed guard at all times. First sign he's losing control, we put him down. But until then, we use him. We learn from him. We survive because of him. The vote was close. 5-4 in favor of letting Peter stay. Shane, Andrea, and 2 of Herschel's daughters voted against. Everyone else, Rick, Dale, Glenn, Herschel, Maggie, and Carl, though his vote shouldn't have counted, voted to give Peter a chance. Fragile trust. Conditional. Based entirely on Peter maintaining control over instincts that grew stronger every hour. Peter sat on the porch steps as Rick delivered the verdict, trying not to think about how good the people inside smelled. How easy it would be to break his webbing restraints. How hungry he was despite eating a possum 2 hours ago. You can stay, Rick said, sitting beside Peter. But there are rules. You stay restrained when you're not working. You don't go near the kids unsupervised. You tell us immediately if you feel like you're losing control. And if when you turn, we end it quick. Agreed, Peter said, relieved and terrified in equal measure. Relieved because he'd have help. Company, purpose, for his final days. Terrified because he was surrounding himself with potential victims. Over the next 2 days, Peter tried to make himself useful. He webbed additional fortifications around the farm perimeter, gray organic webbing that was stronger than rope but looked wrong, slightly pulsing, definitely not normal. He scouted the surrounding area from rooftops and treetops, his enhanced senses detecting walker herds miles away and giving the group time to prepare. He taught Rick and Shane hand-to-hand combat techniques, showed Daryl tracking methods that used scent and sound more than sight. He bonded with Carl, who followed Peter around like a puppy, asking endless questions about Spider-Man, about New York, about what it was like to be a hero. Peter answered as best he could, though his memories were fragmenting. He couldn't remember some of his most famous battles, couldn't recall the names of villains he'd fought, couldn't picture his apartment or his job or his life before the outbreak. The infection was taking his past, leaving only the present and the hunger. But he tried. God, he tried. He demonstrated his abilities for the group, wall crawling up the barn, lifting the farm truck one-handed, webbing objects with impossible accuracy. They were impressed and horrified in equal measure. This was useful. This was also terrifying. A zombie with these abilities would be unstoppable. On the third day, Peter's control slipped for the first time. Glenn had been working on the farm's water pump, trying to get it running again. Peter was helping, using his strength to move heavy equipment. Everything was fine until Glenn cut his hand on a sharp edge. Not badly, just a scratch that drew a few drops of blood. But those few drops were enough. Peter's head snapped toward Glenn, eyes locking on the cut, mouth watering. The hunger roared to life. Overwhelming rational thought, screaming feed, feed, feed. Peter moved without thinking, closing the distance to Glenn in a heartbeat, hands reaching for the bleeding arm. His spider sense screamed danger. Peter forced himself to stop, to step back. But his body wouldn't fully obey. He stood frozen, trembling, staring at Glenn's cut like a starving man looking at a feast. His hands were raised, fingers twitching. His breathing was ragged. He needed. Peter! Glenn's voice was terrified. Peter, man, are you okay? Run, Peter managed through clenched teeth, forcing the word out through hunger that made his vision tunnel. Glenn, run, now. Glenn ran. Smart kid. Peter stood in the farmyard shaking, fighting himself, fighting the infection that wanted him to chase Glenn down and feed, fighting instincts that said prey was escaping and couldn't be allowed to escape. And no, Peter drove his fist into the ground, cracking the packed dirt, using pain to focus his mind. Not food. Friend. Glenn is a friend. Don't hurt friends. Don't. Gunshots. Peter looked up to see Shane 50 feet away, pistol raised, aimed at Peter's head. Behind Shane, the whole group had emerged from the farmhouse, weapons drawn, ready to end Peter if he'd lost control. I'm okay, Peter called out, raising his hands slowly. I'm okay. I stopped myself. Glenn's not hurt. I didn't.
You lunged at him, Shane said, gun steady. You were going to bite him, attack him. We all saw it.
I stopped, Peter repeated, desperate for them to understand. I stopped myself. The infection almost won, but I fought it back. I'm still in control. For how long? Andrea challenged. How long before you can't stop yourself? Before you kill one of us? Peter had no answer, because she was right. Every day was harder. Every smell of blood triggered the hunger stronger than before. Soon he wouldn't be able to stop. Soon the monster would win. I'll isolate myself more, Peter promised. Stay chained up except when you absolutely need me. Stay away from people. I won't risk this again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Rick studied Peter for a long moment, then lowered his gun. Others followed reluctantly. But Shane kept his weapon raised. Next time you lose control, Shane said, his voice carrying absolute certainty, I won't hesitate. I'll put you down before you hurt my people. Understand? Yes, Peter said quietly. I understand. And thank you for not shooting me just now, for giving me another chance. We gave you a chance, Shane replied. Don't make us regret it. That night, Peter chained himself in the barn at his own insistence, heavy chains wrapped around his torso and arms attached to support beams, secured with webbing and padlocks. He wouldn't risk being near the group while they slept. Wouldn't risk the hunger taking over while his guard was down. Carl visited him before bed, slipping into the barn despite his parents' orders to stay away. The kid sat cross-legged in front of Peter's chains, looking up at him with that innocent belief that everything could be fixed if you just tried hard enough. You're not going to turn, Carl said with childish certainty. You're too strong. You'll fight it off. I'm not strong enough, Carl, Peter replied gently. Nobody is. The infection always wins eventually. I'm just lasting longer than most. But you're Spider-Man. Spider-Man always wins. Peter laughed. Bitter, sad sound. Spider-Man lost the minute he got bit. Everything after that has just been borrowed time. But I promise you this, when I become a monster, I won't hurt you or anyone else on this farm, because I'll make sure someone shoots me first. That's how this ends. That's the only way it can end. Carl's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. You saved us. You should get saved too. Life's not fair, kid. Learned that when my uncle died because I didn't stop a criminal when I could have. Learned it again when I got bit saving a family I'll never see again. Learned it every day, since when I watch my humanity slip away, piece by piece. But you know what? Fair doesn't matter. Doing the right thing matters. Protecting people matters. Responsibility matters. Remember that. When I'm gone, when this is over, remember that power. Any power comes with responsibility. Use it well. Carl left crying. Peter sat alone in the barn, listening to the night sounds of the farm, smelling the people sleeping in the farmhouse, fighting the hunger that whispered he could break free any time he wanted. He could feed on them all, satisfy the emptiness forever. No, Peter said to the darkness, to the infection, to the monster growing inside him. Not yet. Not them. I have a few more days, a few more saves, a few more chances to be Spider-Man before I become something else. Let me have that. Let me end as a hero, not a monster. But Peter could feel the truth in his changing biology. The hero was dying, the monster was winning, and time was running out faster than anyone realized. Soon, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But soon, Peter Parker would cease to exist. Only the hunger would remain. Only Spider-Man's powers wielded by a mindless predator that wore his face. And when that happened, everyone on Herschel's farm would be in mortal danger from the one person who'd tried hardest to protect them. A week passed. Peter made himself indispensable. He'd scouted 15 miles in every direction, mapped walker migration patterns, identified safe zones and danger zones, found supplies in abandoned houses that the group would never have located without his enhanced senses. He'd taught Rick hand-to-hand combat techniques that actually worked against walkers breaking necks, targeting joints, using momentum. He'd shown Daryl tracking methods that relied on scent trails and subtle environmental disturbances that normal humans couldn't detect. The group's survival rate had improved dramatically. 0 casualties in 7 days. In the apocalypse, that was a miracle. But miracles had expiration dates, and Peter's was approaching fast. There's a town about 8 miles northeast, Peter reported during the morning briefing, standing outside the farmhouse because being indoors with 12 people made the hunger unbearable. Woodbury, walled settlement. Looks organized. I saw armed patrols, functional infrastructure, maybe 80 to 100 people. But something's wrong about it. The people I saw looked scared, controlled. A settlement means resources, Rick said, considering. Medicine, food, ammunition. We could use allies. Or enemies, Peter countered, his voice rougher than it had been yesterday. Words were getting harder, thoughts fragmented more easily. My spider sense went crazy near that place. Danger everywhere. I'd avoid it.
We'll scout it carefully before making contact, Rick decided. Peter, you did good work. Take a break. You look exhausted.
Exhausted wasn't the word. Peter was deteriorating visibly. The black veins covered his entire upper body now, creeping up his neck toward his jaw. His eyes were more yellow than brown, occasionally glazing over like a walker's. His fingernails had darkened to gray. When he opened his mouth, everyone could see his teeth were sharper. Not fangs yet, but definitely not human anymore. Worse, Peter's mind was slipping. He'd forget words mid-sentence, lose his train of thought, stare blankly for seconds before remembering what he'd been saying. Yesterday he'd called Rick Captain Stacy 3 times before correcting himself, and he couldn't even remember who Captain Stacy was anymore. Some name from his past that his fragmenting memory had grabbed randomly. The hunger was the worst part. Animal meat didn't satisfy anymore. Peter had eaten a pyre deer 2 nights ago, raw bones and all, and been hungry again within hours. His body was changing, adapting, craving something specific that only human flesh would provide. The infection was rewriting his biology to turn him into an efficient predator, using his spider powers as a template to create something worse than any normal walker. Carl approached Peter that afternoon, sitting beside him on the porch while Peter stared at nothing, fighting the hunger that never went away. "Tell me about New York," Carl said eagerly. "What was it like being Spider-Man? Fighting bad guys? Saving people?" Peter opened his mouth to answer and realized he couldn't remember. The memories were there, fragmented, blurry, like watching old VHS tapes that had been recorded over too many times. He remembered swinging between buildings, remembered the feeling of web slinging, remembered the responsibility Uncle Ben had taught him. But the details were gone. Peter struggled for words. It was loud, crowded. I saved people, fought criminals. There was a guy with metal arms, I think. Doctor something. And a goblin? Green face? I can't. He pressed his hands to his head, frustration building. I can't remember their names. I can't remember what they looked like. It's all fading. What about your Aunt May? Carl asked. You mentioned her before. What was she like? Peter tried to picture her face. Nothing. Just a vague sense of warmth of home-cooked meals of someone who'd loved him unconditionally. But no face, no voice, no specific memories, just empty space where a person should be. I don't remember, Peter admitted and heard his voice break. Carl, I don't remember what my aunt looked like. I lived with her for 25 years and I can't picture her face. The infection's taking my memories. Soon it'll take everything. Who I was, why I cared, what made me human. Soon I'll just be hunger and instinct and nothing else. Carl's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. No, Peter agreed. It's not. But it's happening anyway. That's why you need to promise me something. When I turn, when I'm not me anymore, you don't try to save me. You don't risk yourself. You let Daryl or your dad do what needs to be done. Promise me, Carl. I promise, Carl whispered, then ran back to the farmhouse crying. Peter sat alone, trying to remember his aunt's face, and finding only darkness where her memory should be. The infection was eating his past, leaving only the present and the gnawing, endless hunger. That night, Shane caught Peter staring at the sleeping group through the farmhouse window. Peter had been chaining himself in the barn every night, surrounded by webbing and heavy chains that would slow him down if he lost control. But tonight he'd delayed, standing outside the farmhouse, watching through the window as Lori cooked dinner, as Carl laughed at something Dale said, as the group lived their lives 20 feet away from a monster who wanted to eat them. Peter's mouth was watering. His hands trembled. His enhanced senses picked out individual heartbeats. Carl's fast and young. Rick's steady and strong. Lori's quickening as she sensed someone watching. They were prey. Easy prey. Unaware prey. One leap through that window. One burst of super speed and he could feed before they even reached for weapons. Step away from the house. Shane's voice cut through Peter's hunger thoughts like a knife. Peter turned slowly to see Shane 20 feet away, shotgun raised, finger on the trigger. Behind Shane, Daryl had emerged from the RV with his crossbow. They'd been watching. Smart. How long you been standing there? Shane demanded. Watching them like a wolf, watching sheep? Like prey? I don't know, Peter admitted because lying was pointless. I was going to chain myself in the barn, but then I smelled Lori cooking and I couldn't move. He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't admit what he'd wanted. You wanted to eat them, Shane said flatly. You were thinking about attacking, about feeding. Don't lie to me, Parker. I saw your face. You looked at them the way walkers look at fresh meat. I didn't do anything, Peter protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Because Shane was right. For 30 seconds, maybe a minute, Peter had been planning the attack, calculating how fast he'd need to move, which person to grab first, how to incapacitate the others before they could fight back. The hunger had taken over his tactical mind, turned it toward predation instead of protection. Not yet, Shane said, but you're gonna. Tonight, tomorrow, next week. Doesn't matter when. You're gonna lose control and people are gonna die. And I'm not waiting for that to happen. Rick might trust you, Dale might argue about your humanity, but I see what you are. You're a dead man walking. Literally. Shane raised the shotgun higher, aimed at Peter's head. So here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna stand real still while I put you down, quick and clean. You won't even feel it. Better than what's waiting for you. Better than turning into a mindless monster that eats kids. This is mercy. Shane, wait. Daryl started to protest, but Shane cut him off. No waiting. No second chances. He was about to attack the house, Daryl. You saw it. Another 30 seconds and he'd have crashed through that window and killed half our people before we could stop him. I'm ending this now. Peter stood perfectly still, hands raised. Part of him, the human part, the dying part, wanted to argue, to plead for more time, to promise he'd try harder. But another part, the honest part, knew Shane was right. Peter had been seconds away from attacking. The hunger had almost won. It was only getting stronger. Do it, Peter said quietly. You're right. I'm too dangerous. I almost lost control. Next time I might not stop myself. Just make it quick. Headshot. Destroy the brain completely. I don't want to come back as a walker. Shane's finger tightened on the trigger. The farmhouse door slammed open. Rick emerged, pistol drawn but not raised. Shane, lower the weapon. That's an order. He was about to attack. Shane didn't lower the shotgun. I saw him, Rick, standing outside the house, staring at our people like dinner. He's too far gone. We need to end this before we execute someone for what they might do instead of what they did. Rick's voice was cold. Before we become the kind of people who kill first and ask questions later. Lower the weapon. Shane and Rick locked eyes. A battle of wills that lasted 10 seconds before Shane lowered the shotgun with visible reluctance. You're making a mistake, Rick. This thing's gonna kill us all and it'll be on your head. He's not a thing, Rick replied. He's a man fighting an infection. And yeah, he might lose that fight. But until he does, we honor the deal we made. He helps us. We help him. That was the agreement. The agreement didn't include him stalking our camp at night, Shane shot back. You're right, Peter interrupted, his voice heavy with defeat. Shane's right. I was thinking about attacking. For a minute, maybe less, but long enough I saw you all as food instead of friends. I stopped myself this time, but I almost didn't. The hunger's too strong. I can't trust myself anymore. He met Rick's eyes. I'll isolate completely. Barn, chains, armed guard, 24/7. I don't come near the house. I don't interact with people unless absolutely necessary. And if I show any signs of losing control, any at all, you shoot me immediately. No hesitation. No second chances. I won't risk your people's lives any more than I already have. Rick studied Peter for a long moment, then nodded. Agreed. Barn isolation starting now. Daryl, you'll rotate guard shifts. First sign of trouble, you shoot. Shane. Rick turned to his increasingly unreliable friend. You got your wish. He's contained, but we don't kill him unless he actually turns. Understood, Shane said, though his expression made clear he thought this was a terrible idea. Peter walked to the barn under armed escort, Shane and Daryl flanking him like he was a prisoner, which he was, basically. A prisoner of his own failing biology, locked away to protect the innocent from the monster he was becoming. As they chained him inside the barn, heavy chains around his torso, arms, legs, secured to multiple support beams, Peter caught sight of his reflection in a piece of broken mirror someone had left on a shelf. The face looking back barely resembled Peter Parker anymore. Yellow eyes, gray skin, black veins covering half his face, sharp teeth visible even with his mouth closed. He looked like a walker, moved like a walker, smelled like death and rot and hunger. The only difference was he could still think, could still feel horror at what he was becoming, could still remember barely that he'd once been a hero named Spider-Man who'd sworn to protect people instead of eating them. How much longer you think you got? Daryl asked as he secured the final chain. Days, Peter admitted. Maybe a week if I'm lucky, but every day is harder. The hunger's constant now. I think about feeding constantly. I dream about it when I sleep. If I even sleep anymore, I'm not sure. My memories are almost gone. Soon there won't be anything left except hunger and spider powers. That's when you need to kill me. We will, Daryl promised. But until then, we keep you alive. You earned that much. Did I? Peter asked bitterly. Or did I just delay the inevitable while putting everyone at risk? Daryl didn't answer. He left the barn, posting himself outside with his crossbow, ready to shoot if Peter broke free. Peter sat alone in the darkness, surrounded by chains, listening to the distant sounds of the farm preparing for sleep, smelling the people inside the farmhouse, wanting them with a hunger that made his teeth ache. Soon he wouldn't be able to stop himself. Soon the chains wouldn't hold. Soon Peter Parker would cease to exist, and only the monster would remain. He just had to hold on a little longer. A few more days, a few more chances to help before the end came. 3 days in the barn changed Peter, made him wilder, more feral, less human. The group brought him food, deer meat, possum, even a wild boar that Daryl had hunted. Peter ate it all and remained hungry, his body rejecting anything that wasn't human flesh, the infection demanding its preferred diet. He could feel his digestive system changing, adapting, becoming designed for carrion and living meat rather than cooked food. He'd stopped sleeping, didn't need it anymore. His spider-enhanced body plus the infection created something that didn't require rest, only feeding. Peter spent nights staring at the barn walls, listening to heartbeats from the farmhouse, fantasizing about breaking free and hunting. Dale visited every afternoon, sitting outside Peter's chains and talking philosophy like they were old friends having tea instead of a human and a monster separated by iron links. "What makes us human?" Dale asked on the third day, his elderly voice carrying the weight of someone who'd thought deeply about existence. "Is it our biology? Our thoughts? Our choices?" "Don't know anymore," Peter mumbled, words coming harder now. Speech required concentration that hunger made difficult. "Maybe nothing. Maybe we're just meat that thinks for a while before we stop." "I don't believe that," Dale replied. "I think humanity is choice. The ability to choose right over wrong, help over harm, sacrifice over selfishness. You're choosing not to hurt us, Peter. Every second you fight the hunger. Every moment you resist instinct, that's humanity. That's what makes you human despite the infection." "What if choice isn't enough?" Peter asked, and his voice cracked with despair. "What if instinct wins? What if I stop choosing and just act?" "Then we'll do what needs to be done," Dale said gently. "But until that moment comes, you're still one of us. Still human. Still deserving of dignity and respect. Don't give up on yourself yet." Peter wanted to believe him, wanted to think that choice mattered, that willpower could overcome biology, that humanity was something stronger than hunger. But he could feel himself slipping, feel the infection winning cell by cell, thought by thought, memory by memory. The incident with Glenn happened on the 4th day. Glenn had been assigned morning guard duty, bringing Peter his daily ration of meat that Peter couldn't really digest anymore but ate anyway to maintain the fiction that he was still somewhat human. Glenn approached the chains carefully, maintaining distance like you'd approach a caged tiger, set the plate of venison outside Peter's reach. "You need to slide it closer," Peter rasped, his vocal cords damaged now, voice more growl than speech. "Can't reach. Chains too tight." Glenn hesitated, then stepped closer, reaching for the plate. That's when it happened. A piece of broken glass on the ground, half buried in hay. Glenn stepped wrong, twisted his ankle, stumbled, and caught himself on a wooden post. The impact drove a splinter deep into his palm. Blood welled up, just a few drops. Nothing major, nothing life-threatening. But it was blood, fresh, human, and Peter hadn't fed on anything satisfying in 4 days. Peter's eyes snapped to Glenn's bleeding hand. The world narrowed to that point, red drops falling to the ground, the scent of copper and iron and life. His mouth watered, his breathing accelerated. Every instinct, every changed cell in his body, every hunger-driven impulse, screamed at him to feed. Peter lunged. The chains went taut, stopping him 3 feet short of Glenn. But Peter kept pulling, kept reaching, his hands grasping air where Glenn had been standing, his mouth working like he could taste blood that was just out of reach. No words, no thought, just pure animal hunger that overrode everything else. Glenn scrambled backward, eyes wide with terror. "Peter! Peter, man, it's me! It's Glenn! Snap out of it!" But Peter couldn't snap out of it. The hunger was in complete control, and Glenn was prey, and prey needed to be caught and consumed. Peter's webbing shot out automatically, sticky gray strands reaching for Glenn, trying to pull him closer. Glenn dodged left, and the webbing hit the barn wall instead, but Peter was already shooting more webs, trying to trap Glenn, drag him within reach of teeth that had become too sharp, too hungry, too inhuman. "Help!" Glenn shouted, running for the barn door. "Somebody help! He's attacking!" Rick burst into the barn, pistol drawn, saw Peter straining against chains while trying to web Glenn like a fly struggling in a spider's trap. Shane was right behind him, shotgun raised, finger on trigger. "Shoot him!" Glenn yelled, backing toward the door. "He's turned. He's trying to kill me." "I'm not turned," Peter forced out, fighting through hunger fog to find human speech. "Not yet. Just hungry." Glenn bleeding. "Couldn't stop myself. So sorry. So sorry." He collapsed backward, chains rattling as he stopped straining, stopped reaching. The hunger didn't fade, but Peter forced control, shoved the instinct down through sheer willpower that cost him everything. His whole body shook with the effort. "I didn't attack," Peter said, each word a battle against hunger that wanted him silent and hunting. "I lunged, I tried, but I stopped. Chains stopped me. Same thing." "You tried to web him." Shane pointed his shotgun at Peter's head. "You were hunting him. Rick, this is it. He's too far gone. We end it now or we're gonna find Glenn dead in here tomorrow morning." The webbing was instinct, Peter explained desperately. "Spider powers. When I'm hunting, when the hunger's in control, the webbing fires automatically, like a reflex. I didn't choose it, but I didn't break the chains either. Didn't actually reach him. Still in control, barely, but still." Rick holstered his pistol, made his decision. "Glenn, you're off guard duty. No one with open wounds comes near Peter anymore. We post armed guards 24/7 outside the barn, close enough to shoot if he breaks free, far enough that blood smell won't trigger him and Peter." Rick's voice hardened. "Next time you lose control like that, even for a second, we're not debating, we're shooting. Understood?" "Yes," Peter whispered, shame and horror washing over him as the hunger finally released its grip on his mind. "I'm sorry, Glenn. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I would never." "Save it," Glenn said, his voice shaking. "You looked at me like I was food, man. Like I was a cheeseburger. You're not Peter anymore. You're something else." Wearing his face, Glenn left. Shane followed after one last contemptuous look at Peter. Rick stayed, studying Peter with an expression that mixed pity and pragmatism. "How much longer?" Rick asked bluntly. "Hours," Peter admitted. "Days at most. The hunger almost won just now. Next time it might. You should just shoot me. End it before I hurt someone. Please." "Not yet," Rick replied. "You stopped yourself. That counts for something. But you're right about one thing. You're running out of time. So I need to know when you turn, when you go fully feral, is there any way to stop you? Any weakness? Any vulnerability?" Peter thought about it, fighting through the hunger fog that made thinking difficult. "Fire. Sustained fire damages me faster than I can heal. And," he hesitated, "headshots. Even my healing factor can't fix brain damage. You put a bullet through my brainstem, I'm dead. Won't come back, won't turn into a walker. Just dead." "Good to know," Rick said quietly, "for when the time comes." That night, Peter made a final request to Dale, who'd taken over guard duty despite the risk. "If I turn," Peter said, "if I become a mindless monster, I want Daryl to be the one who kills me. Not Rick. Not Shane. Daryl. He's a hunter. He'll make it quick and clean. He won't hesitate or second guess. And," Peter's voice dropped to barely a whisper, "he's the only one here who understands what it means to fight yourself. To fight your own nature. He'll understand that killing me is mercy, not murder." "I'll pass along your wishes," Dale promised. "But Peter, don't give up yet. Every hour you resist is another hour of humanity. That matters. It should matter." "To who?" Peter asked bitterly. "To me. I'm barely me anymore. To the group? They're counting down the hours until they can shoot me without guilt. To the universe? The universe doesn't care. I'm just another victim of a virus I couldn't beat." "You matter to Carl," Dale countered. "That boy looks up to you, sees you as a hero. If you give up now, if you let the infection win without fighting to your last breath, what does that teach him? That heroes quit when things get hard?" Peter had no answer for that. Because Dale was right. Quarrel was watching, learning, forming ideas about courage and responsibility and what it meant to be human. Peter's final days would teach the kid lessons that might last a lifetime. So Peter made himself a promise. He'd fight the hunger for as long as possible. Every hour, every minute, every second of control was a victory against the infection. And when he finally lost, when the monster won completely, he'd go down knowing he'd fought as hard as he could. With great power comes great responsibility, Peter whispered to himself, Uncle Ben's lesson that had defined his life. Even now, especially now, I have the power to resist. So I have the responsibility to try. The hunger growled its disagreement, but Peter shoved it down one more time. 1 hour at a time. That's all he had to manage. 1 hour of staying human, then another, until eventually, inevitably, he couldn't manage even 1 more hour. But not yet. Not tonight. Daryl Dixon had seen enough death to recognize it approaching. He'd watched his mother drink herself to death slowly over years. He'd watched his brother Merle destroy himself with drugs and bad choices. He'd watched the world end and the dead walk and humanity tear itself apart. And now he watched Peter Parker dying by inches, losing his humanity one memory at a time, fighting a battle that couldn't be won but deserved to be fought anyway. That's why Daryl volunteered for night guard duty. Not because he wanted to, not because he liked Peter, but because he respected the fight. Respected the refusal to quit even when quitting would be easier. That was worth something. You don't have to stay, Peter said from his chains on the first night. His voice was barely recognizable now, damaged vocal cords turning speech into something between a rasp and a growl. I know you don't like me. Don't like or dislike you, Daryl replied, sitting against the barn wall with his crossbow across his lap. You're just some guy got bit who happens to have superpowers. Doesn't make you special. Then why volunteer? Daryl was quiet for a while, loading a bolt into his crossbow, checking the mechanism. Finally, you remind me of my brother, Merle, always fighting himself, fighting his own demons, his own addictions, his own nature. Never could quite win that fight, but he never quit trying either. Died trying, actually. Before all this shit started. Sorry, Peter said automatically. Don't be. He chose his path. Just like you're choosing yours. Daryl looked at Peter's chains, at the gray webbing coating the walls, at the black veins covering Peter's visible skin. Could have run off. Could have isolated yourself somewhere nobody'd find you. Could have just given up and let the infection win. But you didn't. You're still fighting. Still trying to help people even while you're dying. That's something. Doesn't feel like something, Peter admitted. Feels like failing in slow motion. Failing's only failing if you quit before it's over, Daryl said. My brother taught me that. Before the drugs, before he got mean, he used to say, Daryl, don't matter if you win or lose. Matters if you fight with everything you got. You're fighting. That counts. They sat in silence for a while. Then Peter spoke, his voice carrying a weight that suggested this might be important. Uncle Ben taught me something similar. He said, with great power comes great responsibility. Means if you can help, you have to help. If you can fight, you have to fight. If you can make a difference, you have to try. Even if it costs you everything. That's some heavy shit for a kid in a costume, Daryl observed. Peter laughed. Harsh, bitter sound that ended in a cough. I'm 25. Was 25. Not sure what I am anymore. Not sure it matters. Soon I'll just be another walker with superpowers. Just another monster. You ain't a monster yet, Daryl said firmly. Monster wouldn't chain himself up. Monster wouldn't fight the hunger. Monster wouldn't care about protecting people he's never met. You're sick. Dying. Infected. But you ain't a monster. Not while you're still choosing to resist. How long do you think I have? Peter asked quietly. Daryl looked at him, really looked. At the black veins covering Peter's face now. At the eyes that were more yellow than human. At the way Peter's hands trembled constantly. Fingers twitching like they wanted to tear into flesh. At the teeth that were definitely fangs now. Visible even when Peter's mouth was closed. Day or two, Daryl said honestly. Maybe less. You're deteriorating fast. Skin's turning gray. Eyes are wrong. You're moving more like a walker every hour, that twitchy thing they do. Like their muscles don't work right. Won't be long now. Good, Peter said, and meant it. I'm tired, Daryl. So tired of fighting myself. fighting the hunger, fighting to remember who I was. It's exhausting. Part of me just wants to let go. Let the infection win. Stop fighting and just stop. But you won't, Daryl said. No, Peter agreed. I won't. Because Carl's watching. Because your group needs the warning about Woodbury. Because I made a promise to use my power responsibly until I don't have power anymore. Because he trailed off, struggling to articulate something he barely understood himself. Because if I quit, if I give up, then everything I've done, everything Spider-Man stood for means nothing. I have to fight to the end. Even if the end is coming fast, then I'll be here when it comes, Daryl promised. When you turn, fully turn, no going back. I'll make it quick. Won't let you suffer. Won't let you become one of them things that just wander around without purpose. You got my word on that? Thank you, Peter whispered. That means more than you know. The moment of truth came sooner than either expected. 2 days later, a walker herd approached the farm sensors Peter had set up, triggered early warning, giving the group 20 minutes to prepare. But 20 minutes wasn't enough. The herd was massive, over 100 walkers. Drawn by some combination of noise and scent and bad luck, the group mobilized, grabbing weapons, taking positions, preparing to defend the property. Peter heard it all from the barn, heard Rick shouting orders, heard guns loading, heard Carl's frightened voice asking if they'd be okay, heard the distant moans of the approaching herd. Let me out, Peter begged Daryl, who'd drawn his crossbow and was preparing to join the fight. Let me help. I can stop that herd. I can save them. You can't be trusted, Daryl replied, though his voice carried regret. Glenn almost died because you lost control. Rick's orders are clear. You stay chained. No exceptions. They're going to die. Peter's voice rose to a shout. 100 walkers, Daryl. Your group has 12 people and half of them don't know how to fight. They need me. Let me help one more time before I turn completely. Please. Can't, Daryl said, and left the barn. Peter watched through the barn window as the battle began. Watched Rick's group form a defensive line. Watched them fire, reload, fire again as the walker herd shambled toward them. Watched them get overwhelmed. Maggie went down first, tackled by 3 walkers. Glenn pulled her free but took a bite to the arm. Peter could see it from 100 yards away, could smell the blood. Andrea fired until her pistol clicked empty, then started using it as a club. Dale tried to reload his rifle and fumbled, walkers closing in. Carl fired his little pistol with tears streaming down his face. They were losing, going to die. All of them. And Peter could stop it. Could save them. If he just broke free. No, Peter told himself, straining against chains that held firm. Rick said stay. Rick gave orders. I can't break orders. Can't risk losing control. Have to trust them to survive without. Laurie screamed. Peter's head snapped toward the sound. Laurie was trapped against the farmhouse wall, walkers on 3 sides. Carl running toward his mother and about to be surrounded himself. Something broke inside Peter. Not his humanity, that was already mostly gone. Not his mind, that had been fragmenting for days. What broke was his obedience. His willingness to follow orders while people he'd sworn to protect died 20 yards away. I'm sorry, Rick, Peter whispered. Then he pulled. The chains snapped like string. The webbing dissolved under super strength that the infection had enhanced beyond normal spider levels. The barn walls cracked as Peter tore free from restraints that should have held but couldn't contain a zombie with enhanced abilities, and nothing left to lose. Peter emerged from the barn and Rick saw him, eyes going wide with horror. Shoot him! He's loose! Shoot! But Peter wasn't attacking the group. He was attacking the herd. Peter hit the walkers like a hurricane. No grace. No Spider-Man acrobatics. Just pure, savage violence from something that was barely human anymore. He grabbed walkers by their necks and threw them into trees hard enough to shatter bones. He punched through skulls with bare fists. He webbed walkers to the ground and stomped on their heads until they stopped moving. He was a berserker. A monster. An animal that happened to be killing other monsters instead of people. Peter moved through the herd with terrible efficiency, and 50 walkers died in 3 minutes. Then 70. Then 90. The group could only watch in horrified fascination as their former ally became exactly what they'd feared, a predator without restraint, a killer without conscience, a zombie with superpowers that made him unstoppable. But he wasn't attacking them, even lost in hunger rage, even moving on pure instinct. Peter was protecting them instead of eating them. Some buried core of humanity, some fragment of responsibility that even the infection couldn't kill, kept him focused on the right targets. The last walker fell. Peter stood in the middle of the carnage, surrounded by bodies, covered in black blood, breathing heavily. The barn behind him was on fire. Some combination of knocked-over lantern and chaos had ignited the structure. Flames climbed the walls, casting Peter in hellish light, and slowly, terribly, Peter's head turned toward the RV where the group had retreated. His eyes locked on them. His nose flared, scenting prey. His mouth opened, revealing teeth that were definitely fangs now. He took one step toward them, then another. The hunger had saved them from walkers. Now the hunger wanted its reward. "Peter?" Carl's voice, small and frightened. "Peter, please. You promised you wouldn't hurt us." Peter took another step forward, then stopped. His whole body shook with the effort of fighting instinct that screamed at him to feed. His hands clenched and unclenched. His breathing was ragged. "Run," Peter forced out, his voice more animal than human. "Run now. Can't hold much longer." The group ran, piled into the RV, the cars, anything with wheels, fled the burning farm, the dead walkers, and the monster who'd saved them but couldn't save himself. Peter stood watching them go, every instinct demanding he chase, he hunt, he feed. But he didn't. He held himself in place, through sheer willpower, until the vehicles were out of sight. Then he collapsed to his knees in front of the burning barn, surrounded by corpses, and screamed, not from pain, from anguish, from the knowledge that this was it. This was the moment Peter Parker truly died. The last thread of humanity had snapped when he broke the chains. Now only instinct remained, only hunger, only the monster. The farm burned behind him. The group was gone. Peter was alone with the hunger and the night and the terrible knowledge that next time he saw living people he wouldn't be able to stop himself. The infection had won. Peter was gone. Only the predator remained. Peter didn't remember how long he sat in front of the burning barn. Hours? Days? Time had stopped meaning anything. His thoughts were fragmenting faster now, consciousness flickering like a dying light bulb, turning on and off, long periods of nothing punctuated by brief flashes of awareness. When he finally moved, it was because his spider sense detected living prey. Humans. The group. Close. Maybe 2 miles southeast. Hunt. Feed. The instinct was overwhelming. Undeniable. Peter's body moved on autopilot, tracking scents he could detect from miles away, following the trail Rick's group had left. He didn't walk. He ran on all fours sometimes, his body adapting to hunting mode, moving like an animal because that's what he was becoming. "No," a voice in his head, small, dying, barely there, protested weakly. "Not them. Friends. Protect. Don't hunt." But the voice was fading. Soon it would be gone completely. Soon only the hunger would remain. Peter tracked them to an abandoned rest stop on the highway. The group had stopped to rest, to regroup, to debate what to do about the monster that had saved them. Peter crouched on the roof of a gas station across the street, watching them through windows, counting heartbeats, selecting prey. Carl first. Smallest, easiest. Then Lori. Then Dale. Old, slow, vulnerable. Then the others in order of ease of capture. The hunger was tactical, calculating, using Peter's combat experience to plan the most efficient hunt. "Find them," Peter mumbled to himself, words barely coherent. "Protect them." No. Hungry. So hungry. Not food. Friends. What's friends? He couldn't remember. The word had lost meaning. People were just living meat, potential sustenance, nothing more. The infection had erased almost everything except basic concepts. Hunt, feed, survive. Peter was about to leap from the roof, about to attack, when something stopped him. Not conscience. That was mostly gone. Not morality that didn't exist anymore. What stopped him was a memory so fundamental that even the infection couldn't erase it. With great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben's voice. The lesson that had defined Spider-Man, the principle Peter had lived by for 10 years. It echoed through his fragmenting mind, repeated itself, refused to be forgotten even when everything else had been taken. Responsibility. He had power. Therefore he had responsibility. Not to harm, to protect. Peter forced himself to step back from the roof's edge, forced his body to retreat instead of attack, left a dead deer on the gas station's doorstep, an offering, a gift, proof that some fragment of humanity still fought against the hunger. Then he disappeared into the darkness before the hunger could win again. The next days were a blur. Peter tracked the group, stayed close, protected them from walker herds without revealing himself. He'd kill approaching walkers, then vanish before anyone could see him. He'd leave dead animals as food supply. He'd watch from shadows, fighting the urge to attack, fighting himself constantly. He was becoming something unique, a zombie that retained just enough intelligence to resist the hunger, just enough humanity to choose protection over predation. But it couldn't last. The infection was still spreading, still consuming what little remained of Peter Parker. One night, Carl saw him on a rooftop. "Peter," the boy shouted, joy and fear mixed in his voice. Peter wanted to respond, wanted to wave, to speak, to reassure the kid he was okay. But he wasn't okay, and speaking was almost impossible now. His vocal cords were mostly rotted, his language centers damaged. So Peter just watched, memorized Carl's face, then left before the hunger could convince him to do something terrible. Rick found the next deer Peter left, studied it, understood.
He's still out there, Rick told the group.
Still protecting us. Still trying to help even though he's... Rick couldn't finish the sentence. "He's a walker with superpowers," Shane said bluntly. "And one of these days he's gonna lose that last bit of control and kill us all. We need to hunt him down. End it. Before he ends us." "He's had a dozen chances to attack," Rick countered. "He doesn't. He's still Peter in there somewhere. Still choosing not to hurt us." "For how long?" Shane demanded. "How long before that choice stops being a choice? Before he just attacks on instinct?" Rick had no answer. Because Shane was right. It was only a matter of time. Peter was deteriorating daily. Soon he'd lose the last fragment of control. Soon he'd become exactly what Shane feared. But not yet. Not today. Today, Peter was still fighting, still resisting, still protecting them from shadows while dying by inches, losing himself one thought at a time, counting down to the inevitable moment when the hunger would win completely, and Peter Parker would cease to exist in any meaningful way. He just had to hold on a little longer, had to protect them a little while more, had to prove that even at the end, even dying and monstrous, he could still be responsible for the power he'd been given. With great power comes great responsibility, even now, especially now, until the very end. Rick's group had been on the road for 2 days since fleeing the burning farm. They'd found temporary shelter in an abandoned middle school on Highway 85, classrooms with intact doors, a cafeteria with some canned goods left behind, enough space for everyone to sleep without being cramped. It wasn't perfect, but it was defensible. "You think he's dead?" Glenn asked on the second night, standing watch on the school's roof while the others slept inside. "Peter, that fire was intense. Even with his healing factor, nothing that tough dies easy," Daryl replied from his position 20 feet away, crossbow loaded and ready. "He's out there somewhere. Question is whether he's still fighting the infection or if he's fully turned." As if summoned by the conversation, a sound echoed from the darkness beyond the school's fence. Not a walker's moan, but something worse. A voice, barely human, talking to itself in broken fragments. "Find them. Have to. Protect. No. Hungry. So hungry. Smell them. Close. Very close." Glenn's flashlight swept the perimeter. Nothing. But the voice continued, drifting from different directions like its source was moving impossibly fast. "Not food. Friends. Remember? Friends. What's friends mean?" "That's him," Daryl said quietly, scanning the darkness with his crossbow. "That's Peter, and he's hunting us." Peter Parker no longer existed in any meaningful sense. What remained was a collection of instincts wrapped in spider-powered biology, with occasional flickers of consciousness that surfaced like a drowning man gasping for air before being pulled under again. He'd tracked Rick's group for 2 days by scent alone, could smell them from 5 miles away, could distinguish individual people by their unique biochemistry. could follow their trail even when it crossed streams or went through areas saturated with walker rot. His enhanced senses made him the perfect hunter. But fragments of Peter remained, buried deep, fighting. The creature that had been Peter Parker crouched on a water tower 200 yards from the school, watching the building through eyes that could see in near darkness. It counted heartbeats. 12 people inside. Easy prey. Unaware prey. The hunger demanded he attack immediately, overwhelm them through speed and strength before they could mount a defense. But something stopped him, a memory so fundamental it survived even massive neural damage. Protect, not harm. Responsive. Protect, Peter mumbled, his damaged vocal cords turning the word into something between a growl and a hiss. Have to protect. From what? From me. The internal war raged. Attack versus resist. Feed versus protect. Monster versus the ghost of the man he'd been. Peter compromised. He wouldn't attack the group, but he'd stay close, guard them, kill any walkers that approached, leave food offerings, protect from shadows even though every second near them made the hunger scream louder. He dropped from the water tower, 30-foot fall that he landed silently, all fours, more animal than human now. His body had adapted to hunting posture, spine curved wrong, limbs too long, movements that combined human agility with spider locomotion in ways that shouldn't be possible. Peter circled the school's perimeter, eliminated 3 walkers that had been shambling toward the fence, dragged their corpses away so the smell wouldn't attract more. Then he killed a deer he'd tracked earlier, placed the carcass near the school's back entrance where someone would find it in the morning, still protecting, still trying, even though his mind was mostly gone and the hunger never stopped and he couldn't remember why these particular humans mattered except that they did. Somehow, they mattered more than feeding. Morning came. Carl woke first, went to check the perimeter, found the deer. Dad, he called back to the school. Someone left us food again. It's Peter, isn't it? He's still out there helping us. Rick emerged, examined the deer, fresh kill, throat torn out by something with incredible strength, dragged here from at least a quarter-mile away based on the trail. He scanned the tree line, looking for any sign of Peter, seeing nothing but knowing he was being watched. If you can hear me, Rick called out to the forest. Thank you. For the food. For protecting us. For still fighting even when he couldn't finish. How do you thank someone for not eating you? For choosing starvation over survival? From his hiding spot in the trees, Peter heard Rick's words, didn't fully understand them. Language was mostly noise now, meaning stripped away by neural decay, but recognized the tone, gratitude, acknowledgement, something that made the small human part of him feel less alone. Welcome, Peter tried to say, but what came out was a gurgling growl that sent birds fleeing from nearby trees. That night, Carl couldn't sleep. He slipped out of the school against his parents' orders, stood at the fence, stared into darkness. Peter, he called softly. I know you're out there. I saw you on that rooftop yesterday. I just want to say, thank you, for not giving up. For still being you even when everything says you shouldn't be. On the water tower, Peter heard every word, felt something in his chest, not hunger, not instinct, something else. Something painful and beautiful and utterly human that the infection couldn't quite destroy. Peter! Carl's voice broke, tears evident. Please don't die. Please keep fighting. You're still a hero. You're still... Lori burst out of the school, grabbed Carl, pulled him back inside while scolding him for taking such a stupid risk. But Carl had said what he needed to say. Had reminded Peter, or the thing Peter was becoming, why the fight mattered. Peter sat on the water tower until dawn, watching the school, fighting the hunger that demanded he attack, fighting himself in the eternal war between monster and man. He was losing that war, losing more every hour. Soon there would be nothing left to fight with, but not yet, not tonight. Tonight he could still protect, still guard, still be Spider-Man in the only way left to him, from shadows, from distance, from the darkness he'd become. The scouts found Rick's group on the 3rd day. 2 men in military-style clothing, driving a pickup truck with Woodbury stenciled on the side, stopped at the school to investigate. They approached cautiously, weapons ready but not hostile. Anyone alive in there? The lead scout called. We're from Woodbury, a settlement about 8 miles northwest. We've got walls, supplies, safety. If you're survivors, you're welcome to join us. Rick emerged, immediately suspicious. "What's the catch?" "No catch," the scout replied. "Our leader, the governor, he's trying to rebuild civilization. Gather survivors, establish order, create something worth living for. You look like you could use help." From the forest, Peter watched this exchange with what little analytical capability he retained. His spider sense was screaming warnings. These men were dangerous, deceptive, wrong in ways that even his damaged mind recognized as threats. Woodbury wasn't safety. Woodbury was a trap, but he couldn't warn Rick, couldn't communicate beyond broken words and animal sounds, could only watch as Rick, desperate and exhausted, agreed to visit Woodbury to evaluate whether it was safe for his group. Peter made a decision. He'd scout Woodbury ahead of them. Infiltrate, gather intelligence, find the danger his spider sense detected, and if necessary he'd kill the governor and his men to protect Rick's group, even if it meant revealing himself as the monster he'd become. That night, Peter approached Woodbury using stealth that combined spider powers with predator instincts, wall crawling up the wooden barriers that surrounded the settlement, moving through shadows that even searchlights didn't penetrate. His spider sense guided him past guards, past patrols, into the heart of the compound where the wrongness concentrated. What he found horrified even his mostly dead conscience: walker pits. Arenas, where the governor forced survivors to fight captive walkers for entertainment. Aquariums filled with walker heads kept alive and conscious, eyes following movement, jaws working uselessly. Torture chambers where people who questioned the governor's authority were broken physically and mentally. And in the center of it all, the governor himself. Peter watched through a window as the governor interrogated a captured survivor, using techniques that made it clear this man enjoyed the power, the control, the fear. He was worse than walkers. At least walkers were mindless. The governor chose cruelty, chose domination, chose to be a monster while still being human. Peter's damaged mind reached a conclusion. This man would hurt Rick's group, would enslave them or kill them or turn them into entertainment. This man was a threat that needed to be eliminated. Peter was preparing to crash through the window, to kill the governor with bare hands, when his spider sense exploded with warning. Guards, behind him, surrounding him, armed with nets and chains and tranquilizer darts. "Now," someone shouted, and the guards attacked as one. Peter tried to fight, but tranquilizers were already flooding his system. Drugs that would have killed a normal person but just slowed a zombie with enhanced metabolism. He webbed 3 guards to walls, threw 2 others into trees, but more kept coming. Nets wrapped around him, chains tangled his limbs, and the drugs were winning their fight against his system. Peter collapsed, consciousness fading, and the last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the governor's face peering down at him with fascination and hunger that had nothing to do with feeding and everything to do with control. "What the hell are you?" the governor asked, poking Peter's gray-skinned face with a stick. "A zombie that moves like that? That thinks enough to infiltrate my town? You're not like the others. You're special. Useful." Peter tried to speak, to warn Rick somehow, to do anything. But the drugs pulled him under, and he knew nothing more. Peter woke in a cage, not a cell, not a room, a literal cage, 8 feet by 8 feet, steel bars, suspended 3 feet off the ground in what looked like a warehouse. Around him, other cages held walkers, regular mindless walkers that moaned and reached through bars, trying to grab anything living. But Peter's cage was isolated, separated from the others by 20 feet of empty space. The governor stood outside the cage, studying Peter like a scientist examining a new specimen. "Remarkable," the governor said, circling the cage. "You're infected, I can see it in your eyes, your skin, your teeth. But you're not mindless. You infiltrated my town using stealth. You attacked my guards with tactical awareness. You're something new, something I can use." Peter said nothing, couldn't speak beyond growls. His vocal cords were too damaged now, but his mind, what remained of it, understood. The governor wanted to weaponize him, turn him into a trained attack dog aimed at enemies. "I'm going to make you a deal," the governor continued. "I'll feed you. Real food. Human food. Fresh meat from enemies I need eliminated. All you have to do is kill when I tell you to kill. Serve me and you'll never be hungry again." The offer should have been tempting. Peter was starving, hadn't fed on anything substantial in over a week, was running on fumes and spider-enhanced metabolism that let him survive longer than possible but not indefinitely. The hunger was constant agony now, worse than any pain he'd experienced while human. But even mostly dead, even more monster than man, Peter recognized evil when he saw it. The governor wanted a slave, a weapon, something he could point at innocent people and watch tear them apart. Peter stared at the governor with yellow eyes and forced out a single word through damaged vocal cords. The governor's expression hardened. Then you starve. Let's see how long your principles last when the hunger becomes unbearable. I've broken stronger wills than yours. 3 days passed. No food, no water. Just Peter alone in a cage, starving, fighting the hunger that demanded he agree to the governor's terms, that told him serving a monster was better than dying of starvation. But Peter had spent weeks fighting the hunger, had resisted eating Rick's group despite being surrounded by easy prey, had chosen protection over predation again and again. He wouldn't stop now, wouldn't become the governor's weapon no matter how much it hurt. On the 4th day, someone new approached his cage. A man with a scarred face and a crossbow, familiar somehow, though Peter's memory was too damaged to place him. "You're the spider guy," the man said. Southern accent, rough voice, the one Daryl talks about in his sleep. Says you saved his life at that farm. Says you're a hero turned monster. Peter stared, trying to remember. Daryl. The name triggered something. Friend. Hunter. Understood fighting yourself. Made a promise about mercy. And Merle. Peter managed, dredging the name from fragmenting memory. Daryl's brother. That's right, Merle confirmed. Surprised Peter could speak at all. Governor caught you trying to scout Woodbury. Wants to turn you into his personal attack dog. You keep refusing. Why? You're infected, you're turning, you're gonna die anyway. Why not serve the governor, get fed, at least satisfy the hunger before the end? Peter considered how to answer with vocal cords that barely worked. Finally, saw, my brother, fight, meth, addiction, lost. But, tried, respected, the trying. Merle went still. How the hell do you know about that? Daryl told me. Before, when, still human. Said, fighting yourself matters, even if lose. The fight mattered. Understanding dawned on Merle's scarred face. This wasn't just any monster. This was someone who'd known Daryl, earned Daryl's respect, lived the same struggle Merle had lived for years, fighting your own demons even when losing. The governor's gonna kill you, Merle said quietly. Starve you until you break or die. You know that, right? Better than being his weapon. Better die human than live monster. You ain't human anymore, Merle pointed out. Still choose. Still me. Little bit. Enough to matter. Merle studied Peter for a long moment, some internal debate playing across his features. Finally, what if I help you escape, get you out of here before the governor breaks you? But you gotta do something for me, you protect my brother. Daryl's with that group you were following. The governor's planning to hit them, take their supplies, maybe kill the men and enslave the women. You get out, you warn them, you keep Daryl safe. Peter's mind processed this through fog and hunger and neural damage. Merle was offering escape, freedom, a chance to warn Rick and protect the group. All Peter had to do was survive long enough to deliver the warning. Deal, Peter rasped. But before Merle could act, the governor had other plans. Bring him to the arena, the governor ordered his guards. Let's see if starvation has made him more cooperative. Put him in with that survivor we caught trying to escape. Either the spider zombie kills him and proves he can be trained, or he refuses and we shoot both of them. Either way, we get entertainment. Peter was dragged from his cage, too weak to resist effectively, days without food leaving him barely functional. They threw him into an arena surrounded by walls topped with screaming people from Woodbury. Watching like this was a sport instead of murder. Across the arena, a terrified man cowered, some survivor the governor had captured. Probably someone who'd questioned his authority or tried to leave Woodbury. Kill him, the governor ordered from his viewing platform. Kill him, and I'll feed you. Refuse, and I'll kill you both. Choose. Peter looked at the terrified man, smelled his fear, heard his racing heartbeat. The hunger screamed at Peter to attack, to feed, to satisfy the burning emptiness that had consumed him for days. This man was prey. Easy prey. Terrified prey. All Peter had to do was cross 20 feet of sand, and he could finally eat. Finally end the starvation. Finally satisfy the craving that had driven him to the edge of madness. Peter took one step toward the man. The crowd roared its approval. The governor smiled. Then Peter stopped, turned to face the governor instead. Forced words through vocal cords that barely functioned. Not your weapon. Not your monster. Fuck you. The governor's smile vanished. He raised a pistol, aimed at the survivor. Then watch him die knowing you could have saved him by obeying. The shot echoed through the arena. The survivor fell, bleeding, dying. Peter roared in impotent fury. Couldn't save him, couldn't stop the governor, couldn't do anything except watch an innocent man die because Peter had refused to become a murderer himself. You'll break eventually, the governor said coldly. They all do. Guards take him back to his cage. No food for another week. Let's see how his principles hold up then. Merle made his move that night. He'd seen the arena, execution. Seen Peter refuse to kill despite starving. Seen the governor's cruelty and recognized it as worse than anything Merle had done in his worst drug-fueled days. Some line had been crossed. Some boundary that made Merle decide the governor wasn't someone worth serving anymore. I'm getting you out, Merle whispered, approaching Peter's cage with bolt cutters. Not because I like you. Not because I'm suddenly a good guy. But because I saw you refuse to kill when it would have been easy. That took guts. And because Daryl would never forgive me if I let you rot here. Merle cut the cage locks, pulled Peter out. Peter could barely stand, too weak, too starved, too damaged. But Merle supported him, half-carried him through the warehouse, past sleeping guards, toward Woodbury's walls. Can you web-sling? Merle asked. Get yourself over that wall. Peter tried, raised his wrist. His web shooters were empty, but his body was producing organic webbing now, gray, pulsing, wrong but functional. He shot a strand toward the wall, pulled himself up with strength he didn't know he still possessed. Merle followed, using a rope ladder. They cleared the wall together, dropped into darkness outside Woodbury's perimeter. Rick's group is 8 miles southeast, Merle said. That's school on Highway 85. Can you make it that far? Have to, Peter replied. Have to warn them. Governor, coming, army, weapons. They'll die. Then go. And when you see Daryl, you tell him Merle helped you. Tell him I wasn't always an asshole. Sometimes I did the right thing. Peter nodded, stumbled into the darkness. Web slinging was harder than it used to be. His coordination was shot. His muscles barely responded to conscious command. His body was shutting down from starvation and infection and weeks of deterioration. But he had 8 miles to cover. 8 miles to warn Rick. 8 miles to fulfill his responsibility one last time before the infection won completely. Peter pushed his failing body to limits that should have killed him, swinging through trees on webbing that barely held his weight, running on all fours when swinging became impossible, dragging himself forward when running failed. He reached the school 3 hours later, more dead than alive, barely conscious. Rick's group was inside, sleeping. Peter crashed through a classroom window, glass shattering, alarms going off, people screaming and grabbing weapons. The group emerged to find Peter collapsed on the floor, surrounded by broken glass, raising his hands in surrender even though he could barely move. Shoot him, Shane's voice. He broke in. He's gonna attack. Wait, Rick ordered, stepping forward cautiously. Peter, is that you? Peter nodded, tried to speak, could only manage broken sounds. His vocal cords were too damaged, language centers too destroyed. He needed another way to communicate. Webbing. He could use webbing. Peter's wrist twitched, gray strands shooting across the classroom floor, forming shapes. Letters. Words. Drawn in sticky silk that spelled out a desperate message. Governor, coming. Woodbury, Army, run. Rick knelt, reading the webbed message. The governor? From that settlement the scouts mentioned. He's coming here? Peter nodded frantically, then used more webbing to draw a rough map. Woodbury's location, the size of their forces, the weapons they possessed. Everything his damaged mind could remember about the threat bearing down on Rick's group.
Why should we trust you? Rick asked.
Though his voice carried more concern than suspicion. You're barely conscious. You look like you're dying. Why come here to warn us? Peter pointed at his own head with a trembling hand. forced out 3 words through vocal cords that were more rot than tissue. Still, me, understanding crossed Rick's face. Despite everything, despite the infection, despite weeks of deterioration, despite looking like a corpse that refused to lie down, Peter was still in there somewhere. Still choosing to protect instead of hunt. Still being Spider-Man in the only way left to him. "How much time do we have?" Rick asked. Peter held up both hands, opened and closed them twice. 20 hours, 20 minutes. He couldn't specify, could only hope Rick understood the urgency. "We need to move," Rick decided, turning to his group. "Now, pack everything. We evacuate within the hour. Peter just saved our lives by warning us. I'm not wasting that gift." Peter wanted to stay, wanted to help them prepare, wanted to do more. But the effort of reaching the school had exhausted what little strength remained. The hunger was overwhelming now. He could smell the group's blood, hear their heartbeats, wanted them with a desperation that made his teeth ache. He couldn't trust himself around them anymore. Peter forced himself to his feet, stumbled toward the broken window. Rick stepped forward. "Where are you going?" Peter looked back, managed one final message through the webbing. "Can't stay. Too hungry. Don't trust self." "Will we see you again?" Carl's voice, small and scared. Peter had no answer. He was dying, starving, losing the last fragments of humanity with every passing hour. Soon there would be nothing left except hunger and instinct and spider-powered body that would become everyone's worst nightmare. He met Carl's eyes one last time, tried to smile, but his face wouldn't cooperate anymore. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night, leaving Rick's group to escape while Peter faced the truth he'd been avoiding. This was the end. The last warning he could deliver. The last time he'd be Spider-Man. The last moment of choosing responsibility over hunger. After this, there would only be the monster. And everyone, Rick, Daryl, Carl, the governor, everyone would become prey to be hunted. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight he'd given them a chance. Tonight he'd fulfilled his responsibility one final time. Tomorrow, the monster would win. But tonight, Peter Parker had been a hero. That would have to be enough. The governor's attack came 18 hours after Peter's warning. Rick's group had evacuated the school, found temporary refuge in an old warehouse complex 3 miles south. They'd fortified the position as best they could, barricaded doors, established sight lines, positioned shooters on the roof, but they were 12 people with limited ammunition facing what Peter's webbed map had indicated was a force of 40 armed militia members. The odds weren't good. "They're coming," Daryl reported from his rooftop position, scanning the road with binoculars. 20 trucks, maybe 30 people I can see, armed with rifles, shotguns. "Shit, is that a mounted machine gun?" "Fall back to secondary positions," Rick ordered. "We can't win a straight fight. We harry them, slow them down, make them pay for every inch. Maybe they'll decide we're not worth the cost." But the governor wasn't interested in cost-benefit analysis. This was about control, about demonstrating that nobody escaped Woodbury, about crushing resistance before it could inspire others. His militia advanced with military precision, surrounding the warehouse, cutting off escape routes. The battle began with gunfire, Woodbury shooters opening up on the warehouse, suppressing fire designed to pin Rick's group inside while assault teams moved into position. Rick's people returned fire, but they were outgunned and surrounded. Then something changed. A Woodbury militiaman on the eastern approach suddenly flew backward, webbed to a tree trunk 20 feet behind him. Another militiaman raised his rifle and found himself wrapped head to toe in gray, sticky strands that immobilized him completely. A third screamed as something grabbed him from above, yanked him into the darkness, left him unconscious but alive. Peter had arrived. He moved through the Woodbury forces like a shadow, using stealth and spider powers to take down attackers without killing them, webbing them up, incapacitating them, removing them from the fight. His damaged mind couldn't articulate why he was being non-lethal. Only that killing was wrong. Harming the Rick group was wrong. Protecting mattered even when nothing else did. But the blood smell was everywhere. Every fight, every struggle, every person he webbed and restrained. Their fierce sweat and bleeding wounds and racing heartbeats triggered the hunger that Peter had been fighting for weeks. Each engagement made him more feral, more animal, less able to distinguish between protecting and hunting. What the hell is attacking us? A Woodbury soldier shouted as his squad mate disappeared into the shadows with only a brief scream. "It's the spider zombie," another replied, panic in his voice. "The thing the governor had caged. It's loose and it's hunting us." The governor received these reports and smiled. He'd anticipated this, had planned for it. Peter was predictable, would always try to protect Rick's group, would always intervene when they were threatened. That protective instinct could be exploited. "Bring up the heavy weapons," the governor ordered. "RPGs, incendiaries, the works. That thing's vulnerable to sustained fire and explosives. We're gonna burn it out of hiding." The Woodbury militia repositioned, bringing forward rocket-propelled grenade launchers and flamethrowers that the governor had scavenged from National Guard armories. They knew Peter's location now, could track his movements by the screams of soldiers being webbed up by the shadows that moved wrong, by the spider sense that let him dodge bullets but not explosions. Peter crouched on a warehouse roof, breathing heavily, fighting the hunger that had intensified to unbearable levels. He could smell Rick's group inside the building below. 12 distinct heartbeats, 12 potential meals, so close and so easy to reach. The only thing stopping him from crashing through the roof and feeding was the thinnest thread of human consciousness that whispered, "Protect, don't harm, responsibility." His spider sense exploded with warning half a second before the RPG hit. Peter tried to dodge, but the explosion was too large, too fast. The warhead struck the roof 3 feet from him, detonating with force that threw him 30 feet through the air. He crashed through a water tower on the neighboring building, tumbled another 20 feet, hit the ground hard enough to crater concrete. His healing factor tried to work, tried to knit broken bones, repair ruptured organs, stop internal bleeding, but the zombie virus was winning the eternal war inside Peter's body. The healing factor was failing. Damage that would have taken minutes to repair was taking hours. Injuries that were survivable a week ago might be fatal now. Peter lay in the crater, coughing blood that was more black than red, and felt his body shutting down. The infection had spread too far, consumed too much. His enhanced physiology had bought him weeks instead of hours, but time had finally run out. He tried to stand, managed to get to his knees, heard footsteps approaching. Woodbury soldiers, weapons raised, coming to finish him off or capture him again. Then he heard something else. Carl's voice, screaming, "Dad, they're breaking through. East entrance." The protective instinct overrode everything: pain, hunger, failing body. Peter forced himself upright, web slung toward the warehouse despite injuries that would have killed a normal person, crashed through the wall where Woodbury soldiers were breaching Rick's position. Peter hit them like a dying hurricane. No strategy. No technique, just pure savage desperation from something that was more corpse than warrior but refused to stop fighting. He grabbed soldiers and threw them, webbed their weapons away, physically blocked the entrance with his own damaged body while Rick's group escaped through the western exit. A second RPG hit Peter directly. The explosion tore away his left arm below the elbow, cracked ribs, set his tattered costume on fire. Peter collapsed, his healing factor completely overwhelmed, unable to regenerate from damage this severe. But he'd bought Rick's group time. They were escaping in their vehicles, heading south away from the battle, safe, protected. That's what mattered. The governor approached Peter's broken body, studied him with clinical detachment. Remarkable. Still alive even after that. "You really are something special." He raised his pistol, aimed at Peter's head. But special doesn't mean unkillable. "Goodbye, spider zombie." Before he could fire, Daryl's crossbow bolt punched through the governor's shoulder. The governor stumbled, his shot going wide. Rick's group hadn't fully retreated. Daryl and Rick had circled back, couldn't leave Peter to die alone after everything he'd done. "Get him," Rick shouted. "We're not leaving him." They grabbed Peter, one arm each, dragging his broken body toward their vehicle while Daryl provided covering fire. The Woodbury militia was too disorganized to mount effective pursuit, too many of their soldiers webbed up or unconscious, their leadership wounded and screaming orders that nobody followed coherently. Rick's group escaped with Peter, threw him in the back of their truck, and drove south as fast as the old engine could manage. They stopped 5 miles south, in a clearing that Daryl had identified as defensible. The governor's forces weren't pursuing. They'd been bloodied badly enough that retreat and regrouping made more sense than continued assault. Rick's group had won, survived, escaped with minimal casualties. They should have been celebrated. Instead, they stood around Peter's dying body and wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake by rescuing him. Peter lay on the ground, barely breathing. His left arm was gone, blown off by the RPG. His ribs were visible through torn flesh. Burns covered half his body. Black blood pooled beneath him. Way too much blood to survive losing. His eyes were glazed, staring at nothing, occasionally flickering with something that might be awareness, or might just be dying synapses firing randomly. "He's not gonna make it," Shane said quietly. "Look at him. He's done." "He saved us," Carl protested, tears streaming down his face. "We have to help him. We have to." "Can't help him, kid," Daryl said, his voice rough with grief he wouldn't fully acknowledge. "He's been dying since he got bit. This just sped things up. Best we can do now is make sure he goes quick and clean." Peter's eyes focused suddenly, locked on Rick. His mouth moved, trying to form words through damaged vocal cords and failing. He tried again, forced sound through ruined throat. "Can't hold it anymore." Rick knelt beside him. "Hold what? Peter, what are you trying to say?" "See you as meat," Peter rasped, and the honesty in his voice was horrifying. "Hungry. So hungry. Always. Hungry. Fought it. Weeks. But losing. Please. End it." He couldn't finish. His body convulsed, back arching, hands clawing at ground. The infection was making its final push, consuming the last fragments of Peter's humanity, turning him from damaged human into mindless predator. "Carl, get back!" Lori shouted, pulling her son away from Peter. "No!" Carl struggled against his mother. "You saved us. We can help you. Some things can't be saved," Peter forced out, each word costing him everything he had left. "Learned that, Uncle Ben, with great power comes great." His eyes went dead. The last spark of Peter Parker extinguished like a candle blown out by wind. What remained wasn't human anymore, just hunger wrapped in spider-powered biology. A predator wearing the face of someone they'd known. The thing that had been Peter lunged at Carl with speed that defied its injuries. Daryl tackled it mid-leap, wrestling it to the ground. Rick grabbed Peter's remaining arm, found it impossibly strong despite the damage, felt muscles that shouldn't work anymore moving within human power. "Web him," Rick shouted. "Use his own webbing." They managed to wrap Peter's body in the gray organic webbing he'd been producing, restraining him long enough to secure proper chains. The Peter thing snarled and snapped at them, no recognition in its yellow eyes, no consciousness beyond the drive to feed. Carl sobbed. "That's not him. That's not Peter. He wouldn't." "He's gone, Carl," Rick said gently, holding his son. "The Peter we knew, the hero, the man who saved us, he's gone. This is just what's left." The Peter thing strained against its restraints, mouth working, trying to bite anything within reach. It didn't speak, didn't think, just hunger and instinct and spider powers that made it the most dangerous walker any of them had ever encountered. "We need to put him down," Shane said, raising his pistol. "Now, before he breaks free." "Wait," Daryl said quietly. "He asked me to do it. Made me promise weeks ago. Said when he turned I'd make it quick. I gotta honor that." Rick studied Daryl, saw the pain the hunter was trying to hide, recognized this was personal. "You sure you can do this?" "No," Daryl admitted. "But I'm gonna do it anyway. 'Cause I promised." Daryl loaded a crossbow bolt, approached the restrained Peter thing carefully. The yellow eyes tracked his movement, the jaw working, hunger written across features that barely resembled the man they'd been. "I'm sorry," Daryl said, his voice breaking slightly. "You deserved better. Deserved a cure. Deserved to live. Deserved." He couldn't finish, just raised the crossbow, aimed at Peter's head, prepared to end it. The Peter thing lunged forward suddenly, chains snapping like paper, super strength overwhelming restraints that should have held. It grabbed Daryl by the throat with its remaining hand, pulled him close, mouth opening to bite. An explosion rocked the clearing. Gunfire. Screams. The governor's forces hadn't retreated. They'd circled around, found Rick's group, launched a second attack while everyone was distracted by Peter's transformation. In the chaos, the Peter thing's grip loosened. Daryl tore free, stumbled backward, The Peter thing turned toward the gunfire, toward the Woodbury soldiers, and something in its damaged brain registered. Threat. Enemy. Protect. The Rick group from enemy. The Peter thing launched itself at the Woodbury militia with no regard for self-preservation, no strategy, no thought beyond eliminating threats to the people it had spent weeks protecting. It moved like a monster from nightmares, fast, deadly, unstoppable even with massive injuries. Fall back, Rick ordered. Let it fight them. We escaped during the confusion. Rick's group ran, left the Peter thing to battle Woodbury alone. Left behind the hero who'd saved them, the man who'd fought himself for weeks to keep them safe, the monster he'd finally become. As they fled, Carl looked back one last time, saw the Peter thing tearing through Woodbury soldiers with savage efficiency, saw it moving like death itself, unkillable and unstoppable and utterly inhuman. I'm sorry, Carl whispered to the monster that used to be his friend. I'm so sorry. The thing that had been Peter Parker stood in the clearing surrounded by corpses. 15 Woodbury militiamen killed in under 3 minutes, torn apart by strength and speed that shouldn't exist in something so damaged. The governor's second assault had been repelled, his forces scattered, his men terrified of the spider zombie that killed without mercy or hesitation. But the Peter thing wasn't defending anymore. It was hunting. Rick's group was running. The Peter thing could smell them. Individual sense. Fear sweat. Blood from minor injuries. Prey. Living prey. The hunger demanded pursuit. Demanded feeding. Demanded satisfaction that had been denied for weeks. The Peter thing moved on all fours. Spider-enhanced speed turning it into a blur. It tracked Rick's group by scent alone, following their trail through woods, across streams, over terrain that would have stopped normal walkers. This wasn't a mindless shambler. This was an apex predator with enhanced senses and combat programming that survived even after consciousness died. 5 miles south, Rick's group heard it coming. Branches snapping, movement through underbrush. Something fast approaching from behind. Something that wasn't trying to hide its pursuit because it didn't need to. It was faster, stronger, more dangerous than anything they could fight. It's Peter, Glenn said, his voice tight with terror. He's hunting us. How do we stop something like that? Andrea asked, checking her pistol's ammunition. He dodged gunfire even when he was still human. Now that he's fully turned, with spider sense warning him about danger, we can't fight him, Rick decided. We run, we hide, we pray he loses our trail or finds easier prey. But the Peter thing didn't lose their trail, didn't get distracted, followed them for hours, tireless, relentless, patient in the way predators were patient when they knew their prey was exhausted and couldn't run forever. The governor, wounded and furious, had been tracking the same prey. His militia was shattered, half his men dead or missing, the rest demoralized and questioning his leadership. But the governor needed to save face, needed to prove he was still in control, needed to eliminate Rick's group before they could inspire other settlements to resist Woodbury's authority. His forces encountered the Peter thing at dusk. Contact, a Woodbury soldier shouted. That spider zombie. Oh God, it's fast. The Peter thing tore through 5 soldiers in seconds. The governor watched from cover, horrified and fascinated. This was a weapon, a living weapon that could be controlled, directed, used. If he could somehow capture it again, weaponize it properly. Fall back, the governor ordered. Controlled retreat. Keep it between us and Rick's group. Let the monster hunt them while we follow at safe distance. It was tactically sound. Let the Peter thing eliminate Rick's group, then capture or kill it when it was distracted by feeding. 2 problems solved with 1 solution. But the governor had underestimated something crucial. The Peter thing wasn't just hunting Rick's group. It was hunting everyone. Anything living was prey. Woodbury soldiers were prey. The governor was prey. The Peter thing changed direction mid-pursuit, turned toward Woodbury's forces instead of Rick's group, recognized the governor as a threat. Something in its dying brain remembered cage, starvation, arena, cruelty. This man had heard it. This man deserved death. Shoot it, the governor screamed. All weapons, fire now. 20 rifles opened up simultaneously. The Peter thing dodged spider sense, screaming warnings, body moving faster than bullets, impossibly fast even with massive injuries. Bullets that should have hit passed through empty air where the Peter thing had been a microsecond earlier. It reached the governor's position, killed 3 bodyguards in seconds, grabbed the governor by his throat, lifted him off the ground with one arm, prepared to bite. Daryl's crossbow bolt struck the Peter thing in the back, not enough to kill but enough to distract. The Peter thing dropped the governor, turned toward this new threat, recognized something. Daryl, friend, not prey. The dying brain held fragments of memory, pieces of humanity that weren't quite dead. The Peter thing paused, stared at Daryl with yellow eyes that held nothing human but somehow still recognized him. Made a sound that wasn't quite words, wasn't quite a moan, something between the two. Yeah, Daryl said quietly, loading another bolt. It's me, and I'm keeping my promise. Making it quick, like you asked. The Peter thing tilted its head, processing. The governor used the distraction to flee, his remaining soldiers covering his retreat, but the Peter thing didn't pursue, just stood there, staring at Daryl. Some fragment of Peter Parker fighting through hunger and instinct to remember why this person mattered. Rick approached slowly, hands raised. Peter, if you can still hear us, if any part of you is still in there, we need you to come with us. We need to end this properly. You don't want to be this thing. You don't want to hurt people. Let us give you peace. The Peter thing looked at Rick, then at Carl, who stood 50 feet back, tears streaming down his face. The dying brain processed. Protect. These people. Important. Why? Can't remember. But important. The Peter thing followed them, not as prisoner but as something else. Some last fragment of Peter Parker choosing to trust the people he'd protected for weeks, choosing to believe they'd do what was necessary. They led it to a clearing, set up a makeshift restraint system, chains, webbing, anything that might hold it long enough. The Peter thing didn't resist, just stood there, swaying, looking at the people it had saved so many times, waiting for whatever came next. Daryl raised his crossbow one final time. I'm sorry it ended like this. I'm sorry we couldn't save you. I'm sorry for everything. The Peter thing made that sound again, not quite words, not quite a moan. Thank you. Then its eyes glazed over completely. The last fragment of consciousness died. The Peter thing lunged forward, all restraint gone, pure hunger and instinct remaining. Daryl fired. The crossbow bolt entered the Peter thing's open mouth, traveled up through the soft palate, penetrated the brainstem, destroyed the neural centers that controlled even zombie motor functions. The Peter thing collapsed, twitched once, went still. After weeks of fighting, weeks of suffering, weeks of dying slowly, Peter Parker was finally truly mercifully dead. But the story didn't end in that clearing. What Rick's group thought was Peter's corpse twitched. The crossbow bolt in its brain should have destroyed enough neural tissue to kill even a zombie. But Peter Parker had been exposed to radioactive spider venom 15 years ago, venom that had rewritten his DNA at a fundamental level, that had given him abilities no human should possess, that had made his biology resilient in ways that defied normal science. The healing factor kicked in one final time. Not enough to restore Peter's mind. That was gone forever, burned away by weeks of infection and neural damage, but enough to route motor functions around the destroyed tissue, to create new pathways in the brain that let a corpse keep moving when it should have been truly dead. The Peter thing's yellow eyes opened. It sat up, the crossbow bolt still embedded in its skull, and looked at Rick's group with nothing human in its gaze. Just hunger. Pure, mindless, infinite hunger. Oh God, Glenn whispered. Headshot didn't work. The headshot didn't work. Fall back, Rick shouted. Everybody to the vehicles. Now. They ran. The Peter thing pursued, moving wrong, jerky, uncoordinated, like a puppet with half its strings cut. The brain damage had affected its motor control, but not enough. It was still fast, still deadly, still hunting. Rick's desperate plan formed during the chaos of their retreat. They couldn't kill the Peter thing through conventional means. It was too tough, too enhanced, too impossible. But maybe they didn't need to kill it directly. Maybe they could use the apocalypse itself as a weapon. There's a walker herd 3 miles northeast, Rick said, checking his maps while they drove. 60, maybe 70 walkers. We lure Peter there, let the herd swarm him, escape during the confusion. Even with his powers, he can't fight that many walkers at once. That's insane, Shane protested. We're leading that thing to more walkers. What if he just kills them all and keeps coming?
You got a better idea?
Rick challenged. Shane had no answer. They reached the herd's location at dawn, an abandoned shopping mall parking lot where walkers had congregated, drawn by some long-past noise or movement, trapped by their own mindless shambling. 73 walkers by Daryl's count, moaning and reaching for nothing. Typical undead behavior. Rick's group made noise, honking horns, shouting, firing guns into the air. Drew the Peter thing's attention, made sure it followed them. Then they drove straight through the walker herd, vehicles plowing through rotting bodies, creating chaos. The Peter thing arrived 30 seconds later, charging into the herd in pursuit of its prey. The walkers turned toward this new stimulus, drawn by movement and sound, surrounding the Peter thing with reaching arms and snapping jaws. "It's working," Carl shouted from the truck's bed. "The walkers are attacking him." But they weren't. Not really. The Peter thing tore through walkers like they were made of paper. Its remaining arm grabbed walker heads and crushed them. Its legs kicked with enough force to shatter spines. Its teeth, impossibly sharp, more predator than human, bit through walker flesh like it was nothing. And the walkers weren't fighting back effectively. They moved too slowly, too clumsily, too stupidly to threaten something with spider-enhanced reflexes and combat programming that survived even brain death. The Peter thing killed 15 walkers in under a minute, then 20, then 30. "This isn't working," Rick said, horror dawning in his voice. "He's killing them. He's killing all of them." But something was happening. Something worse than Rick's plan failing. The remaining walkers weren't just being killed, they were stopping their attack, standing still, watching the Peter thing like they recognized something in it, something that made them passive instead of aggressive. The Peter thing stood among the corpses of the walkers it had killed, breathing heavily, and the surviving walkers didn't attack. They just waited, like dogs waiting for commands from a pack leader. "No," Daryl breathed. "No, that's not possible. Walkers don't do that. They don't follow anything. They're mindless." But these walkers were following something. The Peter thing turned toward Rick's group, tracked them by scent and spider sense that even brain damage couldn't fully destroy. And when it moved, the remaining 40 walkers moved with it, following, obeying, serving. The Peter thing had become an alpha zombie, something that retained enough intelligence to lead other walkers, to coordinate them, to turn a shambling mob into a directed army. And that army was marching toward Rick's group with purpose that normal walkers never showed. "Drive," Rick ordered. "Drive now." The governor received reports of the alpha zombie phenomenon from his scouts, one of the few militia members who'd survived the earlier battles. The description was too specific to dismiss. A spider-powered zombie leading a herd of walkers, moving with purpose toward specific targets, demonstrating tactical awareness no normal walker possessed. "This is what happens when you try to weaponize the impossible," the governor muttered, studying maps of the region. "That thing has to be stopped before it destroys everything in Georgia." His pride demanded he be the one to stop it. His survival instinct suggested running far and fast. The compromise was preparing Woodbury for siege, reinforcing walls, arming every able-bodied person, setting up defenses that might hold against a coordinated walker assault led by something that thought like a predator. But the Peter thing wasn't interested in Woodbury yet. It was pursuing Rick's group, following their scent across miles of Georgia countryside, leading its herd of 40 walkers toward prey that had evaded it too many times. The herd grew as it traveled. Other walkers encountered along the way joined the march, drawn by the alpha zombie's presence, by some pheromone or signal that triggered pack behavior in creatures that shouldn't have pack behavior. 40 became 60. 60 became 80. 80 became 100. By the time the herd reached the outskirts of Woodbury, it numbered over 200 walkers led by a spider-powered alpha that remembered nothing except hunger and targeting priority. Rick's group first, then anything else living. The governor stood on Woodbury's walls, watching the herd approach through binoculars, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine fear. "Bar the gates," he ordered. "Full lockdown. Every shooter on the walls. This is what we trained for." But Woodbury hadn't trained for this. Hadn't trained for walkers that moved with purpose, that attacked weak points in the walls specifically. that used the alpha zombies' enhanced strength to batter through reinforced gates like they were cardboard. The Peter thing climbed Woodbury's walls using spider powers that brain damage couldn't erase, dropped into the compound, killed the first dozen defenders before anyone could react. And when it moved deeper into Woodbury, the Walker herd poured through the breached gates like a flood. Woodbury fell in 17 minutes. Not everyone died. The governor and about 20 survivors escaped through a back exit, fled into the woods, while their home burned and their friends were torn apart. But the settlement that had taken months to build, that had represented civilization's attempt to rebuild, was destroyed by one zombie that shouldn't exist and the army it commanded. The governor watched from a distance as Woodbury burned, watched the Peter thing standing in the center of the destruction, surrounded by its herd, looking for new targets to hunt. "This is Rick's fault," the governor said, his voice cold with fury that masked deeper terror. "He brought that thing to our region. He's responsible for this. And when this is over, when that monster is finally dead, I'm going to make him pay for every life lost tonight." The surviving Woodbury refugees murmured agreement. They needed someone to blame, someone human to target. The Peter thing was beyond revenge, but Rick Grimes wasn't. "First, we survive," the governor continued. "We find shelter, weapons, supplies. Then we figure out how to kill something that can't be killed. And after that," his scarred face twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile, "after that we settle accounts with Rick Grimes and anyone who stands with him." Rick's group had found temporary refuge in an old church 10 miles south of Woodbury's ruins. It wasn't ideal. Stone walls that wouldn't burn but also wouldn't stop determined assault. One entrance and no back exit. Supplies for maybe 3 days if they rationed carefully. But they were out of options. Out of ammunition. Out of energy. They'd been running for 2 days straight, barely sleeping, always hearing the Peter thing's herd getting closer. "We make our stand here," Rick decided. "We're done running. We either stop that thing or we die trying." "How?" Andrea demanded. "We've tried everything. Headshots don't work. Fire doesn't stop it. Leading it into Walker herds just made it stronger. What's left?" Daryl spoke up quietly. "I kill it. Close range. Through the mouth into the brainstem like before, but deeper. Make sure the bolt penetrates far enough to destroy everything. It's the only way." "That's suicide," Shane said bluntly. "You'd have to get within biting distance. Let it open its mouth. One wrong move and you're dead." "Then I don't make a wrong move," Daryl replied. His voice carried certainty born from weeks of watching Peter fight himself, weeks of respecting the struggle, weeks of knowing that eventually someone would have to end it. "Peter asked me to do this, made me promise. I'm keeping that promise." Rick wanted to argue, wanted to find another way. But he'd run out of alternatives and time. The herd was coming. They could hear it now. Hundreds of footsteps shuffling through the woods, moans echoing through trees. The Peter thing's enhanced senses guiding its army straight toward the church.
Then we buy you time, Rick said. We hold off the herd. You focus on Peter. Make it count, Daryl. Make it final.
The herd arrived at sunset, surrounding the church, the Peter thing standing at their center like a general surveying a battlefield. 200 walkers and 1 alpha zombie against 12 exhausted humans with minimal weapons and no ammunition. The mathematics were simple. The group would lose. Rick's people took positions, makeshift barricades at the door, weapons that ranged from axes to sharpened sticks, determination that came from having nothing left to lose. They'd make the herd work for every kill, make the Peter thing pay for every inch, die with honor if dying was inevitable. The Peter thing stared at the church with yellow eyes that held no recognition, no memory, no humanity, just targeting priority and hunger. It could smell Rick's group inside, individual scents, fear sweat, the blood from minor injuries. Prey, trapped prey, easy prey. It directed its herd forward with gestures that combined spider-enhanced coordination with pack-hunting instincts no zombie should possess. The walkers shambled toward the church in organized waves, directed at specific weak points, attacking with purpose rather than random shambling. The first wave hit the barricaded door. Rick and Shane held it closed while Glenn and T-Dog reinforced it with furniture. The door wouldn't hold long. The combined pressure of 200 walkers would break through within minutes. "Daryl, go," Rick shouted. "We'll hold them as long as we can." Daryl slipped out through a side window while the herd was focused on the main entrance. Circled around, used what stealth he'd learned from a lifetime of hunting. The Peter thing didn't notice him immediately. Its attention was on the church, on the prey inside, on the satisfaction of finally ending this chase. Daryl approached from behind, crossbow raised, moving with patience that came from years of tracking deer through similar woods. He had one shot, one chance. Miss and the Peter thing would kill him. Miss and his brother's respect, Peter's trust. His own promise would mean nothing. 20 feet. 15. 10. The Peter thing's head snapped around. Spider sense screaming warning even through brain damage. It saw Daryl, recognized him on some instinctual level. This human was familiar, was friend once, was something. The dying brain held fragments of memory that said not prey, different, important somehow. The Peter thing paused, didn't attack, just stared at Daryl with yellow eyes that contained nothing human but somehow still remembered enough to hesitate. "Yeah, it's me," Daryl said quietly, maintaining his aim but not firing yet. "You remember, don't you? Part of you, buried deep, still knows who I am. Still remembers the farm, the barn, the promise I made." The Peter thing tilted its head, made a sound that wasn't quite words, wasn't quite a moan. "Dar." "That's right," Daryl said, his voice breaking despite efforts to stay steady. "And I'm here to keep my promise. You asked me to make it quick. Asked me to end it before you became a monster. I'm keeping that promise now. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry you had to suffer this much." The Peter thing stood perfectly still. The herd around it had stopped advancing, waiting for direction from their alpha. Everything hung in perfect, terrible balance. Daryl with his crossbow raised, the Peter thing with its mouth closed, the herd surrounding them both in a circle of death. "You were good people, Parker," Daryl said, tears streaming down his scarred face now, not caring who saw. "You fought yourself harder than most people fight anything. You chose to protect us even when your body demanded you eat us. You died saving Carl. You deserve rest. You deserve peace. Let me give you that." The Peter thing opened its mouth. Not to speak. It couldn't speak anymore. Not to bite, it was too far away. Just opened it. Like it understood what Daryl needed to do. Like some fragment of Peter Parker had surfaced one final time, recognized the mercy being offered, accepted it with gratitude that couldn't be expressed. Daryl fired. The crossbow bolt entered the Peter thing's open mouth, traveled straight back through the soft palate, penetrated deep into the brainstem, tore through neural tissue that even the healing factor couldn't route around, destroyed the motor control centers that let a corpse keep walking. The Peter thing collapsed. The crossbow bolt protruded from the back of its skull. Its yellow eyes glazed over one final time. The body twitched once, twice, then went completely still. After weeks of fighting the infection, after weeks of resisting the hunger, after weeks of choosing protection over predation, after becoming a monster and losing every fragment of humanity, after death and resurrection, and being made into something that shouldn't exist, Peter Parker was finally, truly, mercifully at rest. The Walker herd stood motionless for 3 seconds, their alpha fallen, their direction gone. Then they reverted to normal mindless shambling, wandering away from the church in random directions, no longer coordinated, no longer dangerous beyond the usual Walker threat. Rick's group emerged from the church cautiously, weapons raised, not quite believing it was over. They saw Daryl standing over Peter's corpse, saw the crossbow bolt through the skull, saw the herd dispersing. "Is he?" Carl asked, his voice small and afraid. "He's at peace," Daryl replied. "Finally. Took longer than it should have, but he's free now. Free of the hunger, free of the infection, free of everything that made him suffer." Carl ran to Peter's body, collapsed beside it, sobbed like the 11-year-old child he was. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You saved us so many times, and we couldn't save you. It's not fair. You deserved better." "He got what he wanted," Rick said gently, kneeling beside his son. "He wanted to die with honor. He wanted to protect people to the very end. He wanted someone he trusted to make it quick. Daryl gave him all of that. That's not nothing, Carl. That's everything." They burned Peter's body at sunrise. Walker protocol couldn't risk burial when the infection might somehow revive even a corpse. This damaged. They built a pyre from fallen branches, laid Peter on top, set it ablaze with the last of their lighter fluid. Rick's group stood in a circle around the fire watching Spider-Man burn, each person dealing with grief in their own way. Dale spoke first. I didn't know Peter long, but I saw something in him that inspired me. He chose humanity when his biology demanded he be a monster. He fought himself every second of every day for weeks. That's a kind of courage I've rarely seen. We're all lesser for his loss. He taught me about responsibility, Carl added, his voice stronger now though tears still streaked his face. Said that power comes with responsibility, that if you can help you have to help, that you don't quit even when things get hard. I'll remember that. I'll try to be like him. Daryl said nothing, just stood there, crossbow lowered, staring at the flames that consumed the body of someone he'd respected more than he'd ever admit. His promise was kept. His duty was done, but the weight of it would stay with him for years. The fire burned for 3 hours. When it finally died, Rick scattered the ashes across the clearing, ensuring nothing remained that could walk or hunt or harm. But they found something else in the church, where Peter had crashed through the window during his escape from Woodbury. Webbing on the walls, gray, pulsing, wrong but readable, Peter had documented his symptoms during lucid moments, leaving notes in silk that wouldn't decay, hoping to warn others. Rick read them aloud. Day 3, bite healing wrong, black veins spreading, enhanced senses becoming predatory. First memory loss, can't remember street names in Queens. Day 7, animal meat, doesn't satisfy, staring at people like food. Voluntarily isolating, spider sense warns about living humans now. This is wrong. Day 12, forgot Aunt May's face, forgot Uncle Ben's first name. Infection taking memories faster. Vocal cords damaged, soon can't speak at all. Day 18, almost attacked Glenn. Hunger too strong, can't trust myself. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Good. That means I didn't hurt anyone. If anyone else with powers gets infected, there's no cure, even for us. The healing factor just makes it slower, more painful. Don't hope, just prepare for the end. Final note. Tell Carl he was right. Heroes don't quit. They fight to the last breath even when they know they'll lose. With great power comes great responsibility. I tried to live up to that. I hope it was enough. The group stood silent, processing Peter's final words. Messages from a dying man trying to help people he'd never meet. Warnings written in webbing that would last longer than any paper or ink. It was enough, Rick said quietly. He protected us until he couldn't protect himself anymore. He gave us warnings, intelligence, time to escape. He drew the governor's attention away from us. He died saving Carl. If that's not enough, I don't know what is. They spent another hour at the clearing, each person saying private goodbyes to someone who'd been with them for such a short time but left such a deep mark. Then they packed up, prepared to move on, to survive another day in the apocalypse. As they were leaving, Carl asked, "Dad, can we mark where we left him, so people know someone died here protecting others?" Rick considered, then nodded. "Yeah, we can do that." Using rocks and branches, Carl constructed a crude marker at the clearing's edge, and with a sharp stone he carved a symbol into the largest rock, a spider inside a circle. Spider-Man's symbol, Peter Parker's legacy. Below it, Carl scratched words that took him 20 minutes to complete. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, died protecting others. With great power came great responsibility, even in death. 3 months passed before the governor found the grave marker during his hunt for Rick's group. He'd survived Woodbury's fall, gathered new followers, resumed his quest for revenge, and the sight of Peter's memorial triggered something in his calculating mind. A zombie with superpowers, the governor murmured, studying the spider symbol. Killed 200 men and destroyed an entire settlement. That's useful. That's valuable. That's something I can replicate if I understand how it worked. He pulled out a notebook, began sketching plans. If the zombie infection could interact with superhuman biology in ways that created enhanced walkers, then maybe other enhanced individuals could be infected, controlled, weaponized. Maybe the next war wouldn't be one with bullets and strategy. Maybe it would be one with something worse. "Thank you, Spider-Man," the governor said to the grave. You've given me an idea, one that might just change everything. He left the clearing, his mind already racing with possibilities, planning experiments that would require test subjects and superhuman abilities and moral boundaries he'd stopped recognizing years ago. The apocalypse was about to get worse. Much worse. But for now, in this moment, in this clearing, Peter Parker rested, free of the hunger, free of the infection, free of the responsibility that had defined his life and his death. With great power had come great responsibility. And Peter Parker, Spider-Man, had honored that responsibility to his very last breath and beyond. His story was over, but his legacy would endure. In Carl's memory, in Daryl's respect, in Rick's understanding of what true heroism looked like, in the warning left for others who might face similar fates. Some heroes wore capes, some heroes wore masks, and some heroes fought themselves harder than they ever fought external enemies, choosing to protect humanity even while losing their own, proving that character wasn't about the power you had, but about the choices you made with it. Peter Parker had made his choice, had fought himself for weeks, had died protecting a child, had earned rest. That would have to be enough. And in a world where the dead walked and civilization crumbled and monsters wore human faces, maybe it was. Peter Parker entered the apocalypse as Spider-Man, a hero defined by power and responsibility. He fought the infection for weeks, choosing protection over predation, humanity over instinct, others over himself. He died as something worse than a walker, but better than a monster, an alpha zombie that retained just enough consciousness to accept mercy when offered. And he left behind a legacy, that heroism isn't about winning, it's about fighting, about choosing right over easy, about responsibility that survives even when humanity does. With great power came great responsibility, even in death, especially in death.